Greetings and salutations, old friends and hopefully some new friends here. Welcome, welcome to Truthseekers. Tonight is a Truthseekers special event. We are continuing in our Revisiting Roswell series, bringing together the world's greatest researchers, authors, historians, and experts into the Roswell event. And I can think of no better expert, really world-renowned expert, to welcome to our show when talking about the Roswell event than tonight's guest, Donald R. Schmitt. Donald R. Schmitt is a graduate of Concordia University, 5 times best-selling author. Actually, I think this is a little old. It's probably 6 or 7 times best-selling author by now. He's also the former co-director of the J. Allen Hynek Center for UFO Studies of Chicago. There, he served as the director of special investigations for 10 years. And he's also one of the founders and board advisor to International UFO Museum and Research Center in Roswell, New Mexico. Besides that, you may be aware that he is also was a film consultant for the film Roswell, the Hollywood movie, as well as appearing on many different documentaries. He's been on tons of radio shows, podcasts, television, all usually discussing the Roswell or other UFO events. So pleased to have him. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our guest, Mr. Don Schmitt. How you doing, Mr. Schmitt? It's good to talk to you again.
Well, you're very kind, very flattered by your introduction, so thank you.
Well, you may remember I interviewed one other time, and it was probably my favorite interview of my radio show. It was you and Stan Friedman. Those were my 2 favorites from that whole run of hundreds of interviews, and the most memorable to me.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure where to begin, but I did want to begin with, I know you've had this lifelong interest in UFOs. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody ask you why the interest in UFOs, and then why specifically to Roswell being such a focus of your research and authorship of so many books.
I was just in 4th grade at the time of the Kennedy assassination. Okay. And I was home alone with my mother that weekend. My father was away on business, and I was glued to the television set for 4 straight days. And it's an argument I often use against those who suggest that, well, memories fade, people forget, they exaggerate, they fabricate, events in their lives because our memories just do not remain intact. And this happened now going on, we're approaching 60 years ago.
Sure.
And I remember down to the minute exactly what transpired when we first got word, and the nuns wheeling the television set into the classroom and what they said, and then how we were, released early that day, and then watching my mother cry, for 3 straight days over what was happening right before our eyes, that type of thing. And I wasn't in Dealey Plaza at the time. I wasn't down in Dallas. I wasn't involved in any manner, shape, or form. And yet I remember exactly because it was such a profound event in my life. So it's the same argument that we would use regarding our witnesses at Roswell. The difference being they were there. They were involved. It's that profound. So how do you ever forget? And so that carried over. It was a few years later, and I already was very much into history, loved history books. My parents could tell you that whenever they'd ask, well, what would you like for Christmas or for your birthday, that type of thing, I would have book titles listed. 6 years old already, I wanted books for Christmas. And so we're Christmas shopping, and I slipped away into the book section of the department store. Now, mind you, this was right after the Warren report came out, was released, the Kennedy assassination investigation at that time. And there was this book that had the exact same words that were being bandied about at the time of the Warren Report: whitewash, cover up. But it was in reference to a UFO book. It was Frank Edwards' book, Flying Saucers, Serious Business. And I paged through it and I thought, wow, what a big story if this is all true. We're being visited. You know, there's an intelligence from off the planet that may be actually here. And why aren't we hearing about this in the mainstream media? Why is this being whitewashed? Why is this being covered up? That type of thing. And so I couldn't get enough of the subject matter. I couldn't wait to find another UFO book. And the one chapter in the book was entitled, Who's Driving? And it was all about UFO occupant cases. And wouldn't you know it, my next book was by Coro and Jim Lorenzen, the founders of the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, APRO, entitled Flying Saucer Occupants. So the whole book was CE3 occupant stories from around the world. And as Coro and Jim, in the opening text, suggested to the reader, you don't have to believe all of these cases, but just imagine if just one is true. Just one. And how it changes everything. Changes our perception of this world, of our lives, of our futures, everything. And so throughout high school, I really got away with, in my English classes and my speech classes, I would get up and I'd be able to give a talk on UFOs without so much.
You must have had much more understanding teachers than me. I went to Catholic school. They wouldn't hear anything like that. But,
well,
you know,
I went
that's
to
great. So you had this early burning interest in this.
Absolutely. And I went to parochial school. I went to Catholic school for 8 years, but I went to a public high school. And so, yes, you're absolutely correct, Stephen. They were very open to the subject matter because it was at the time that the Air Force was still officially investigating the phenomena. It was still in the public genre for that time. And so you couldn't that readily just dismiss something that the government was still officially investigating. So it still was open territory in that regard. And then through college and then thereafter, I went into investigative training because I wanted to be in the field. I wanted to actually work on these cases. I couldn't imagine anything more exciting than actually being with witnesses and recreating their experiences and going to the scene of the crime, so to speak. And yet I was still a skeptic on Roswell.
Wow.
I still remain a skeptic on Roswell. In fact, even through the mid-'80s, I put out a paper that I could not accept that something of that magnitude could be kept a secret for 40 years, as the case would be at that time. And for making that first trip with Kevin Randall in 1989, both of us, we were so confident that we would.
Yeah, I interviewed him, and he said that you guys thought that you would just wrap this whole case up, case closed in a few days, right?
In a weekend, single weekend, jaunt down to the land of enchantment, New Mexico, and the first day that appeared to be the case because we were speaking to only third-hand, fourth-hand witnesses. But on the second and third day, as we were talking to the first-hand, who had actually handled the wreckage, the material. And one by one, they're describing the same characteristics, the same properties of this unusual, this bizarre material that even 40 years in the future, they still had never seen anything like it. They still could not comprehend what they had held in their very hands. And so Kevin and I were walking away and going, gee, maybe we need to get back down here as fast as we can, because what if we're wrong? And we decided we needed to start treating it as though it was the genuine article. Because I think the worst thing would have been is that we would have still approached this with the preconceived position. We're out to prove that this didn't happen. And I'm sorry, whether it's from the skeptical or the outright believer, That's not the scientific methodology. You go where the evidence leads you. You go where your own research, as it develops and as it remains fluid, as you approach it, you let it rudder the ship. Anytime any scientist, so-called scientist, has a preconceived theory and they set out to prove it, there's nothing scientific about that, because you're going to cherry pick information.
Yeah, I think in this field there's a lot of that. There's believers, and they believe that this was alien, so they find the evidence that would indicate it's alien, and they only talk about that. They don't accept both sides, and that's not a good way to do it.
I could not agree more. And the other thing is, and I find this even especially with journalists in dealing with eyewitnesses, and that's the situation we have with Roswell. That's the situation we basically have with the entire investigation of UFOs, that we're still dealing with a witness phenomenon. Roswell, if we actually had a piece of hardware in our possession, it wouldn't matter what any witnesses, it wouldn't matter what any skeptics or believers said. We'll let the evidence speak for itself.
Yeah, that would be the holy grail if we could find something. Grail. Yeah.
And we continue. That's where our greatest effort continues. Yet, as an investigative journalist, as an investigative researcher, writer, what most still do not do is they feel they've wrapped up an interview, and then they make a judgmental call as to, well, now, do I believe this? Do I accept this? Is there room for error? Do I provide a little latitude? That type of thing. But how many step back and say, what if this person is telling the truth? Most journalists don't do that nowadays, and most investigators don't do that. They feel as though, even in dealing with just a people situation, that they know what's in the person's head, they know what's in the person's heart, that they can make that call. And I think that's one of the reasons that you have to educate yourself as much as possible. That you don't become the end all as much as you at least have so much information to rely on in making such a call, that, well, if they describe, for example, Stephen, if I have 10 witnesses tell me that the ship at Roswell was shaped one way, and then I have a lone individual who comes forward and says, well, it was shaped like this, and it was as big as a house, and it wasn't located there, it was located here. And, well, I think we have the makings of disqualifying that individual.
Yeah.
But
it's what the majority are telling you, right?
But it's up to me to have done enough homework that I can weigh all that information. Because you're hitting on something, Stephen, that I see more and more, where a lone researcher, a lone investigator will speak to one individual and they'll go, I have the star witness. I can wrap this up. I have one individual. I've never talked to anyone else, but I have a witness that you guys haven't talked to, and they say this, and take it or leave it. Again,
that's problematic.
That's problematic. That's faulty reasoning. It's a fault. You're starting on a faulty as far as premise, and you're demonstrating that you're really not an investigator as much as you are an exploiter. What you're seeking to do is, checkmate by just making one move and coming into the game, hours late, that type of thing. We have many colleagues in the field like that. And God bless them, at least they're supporting the case in that regard. But, they'll pull this as far as like Area 51, that particular book with Annie Jacobson, where you come up with a...
Yeah, I have had so many people bring that up to me. And the reason that that's problematic is because the witness that she used that told her all this stuff, he later said, I was just trying to help her sell books. Precisely. Number one. And number two, he told George Knapp an entirely different story about what happened at Roswell. So to me, if I were to write a book and that guy was my source...
And yet we have challenged her. We have publicly, a totally
weather to try to panic us. And that's what Roswell was. But he's the only witness. He's the only person.
Jammed him into a Horton brother flying wing.
Oh, that's what it was. You're right. I apologize.
Recovered by the Russians. And first of all, historically, Joseph Mengele was not captured by the Russians.
No, he was in Argentina.
He escaped to Argentina. He married a beautiful woman in Argentina that he lived out the rest of his life with. And
a lot of those Nazis did. They either went to Paperclip or Argentina. Those were the two places you went if you were a verified Nazi after World War II.
What's interesting, Stephen, is there are all types of FBI documents that they knew they were down there. And yet they were more concerned about the Cold War and that the Nazis could help us with their information regarding the Soviet Union. So we were using as far as them in that regard. So Annie, you totally spun the entire situation. And then as far as the flying wing, well, there were only 2 recovered prototypes.
And both in pieces. Both in pieces, inoperable.
One was reassembled, and it's presently at the Smithsonian.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And it's nothing more than tubular bicycle metal with varnished wood as far as
wrapping around the frame,
around the frame, that type of thing. So, Annie, we're supposed to believe that Mengele created 13-year-old children to appear alien, and they were flown all the way from Russia to the central high desert of New Mexico.
Yeah, the gas tank wouldn't even go that far. Like, just logically, it's so implausible,
and yet
let alone improbable. Yeah.
Yet to this day, even though, as you mentioned as well, that her source has reneged, has backed down. He did even as far as an ABC Nightline where he recanted, and he made that comment, I was just trying to help her sell books. Well, she's still trying to sell books.
Yeah, well, good for her, because it worked. She sold an awful lot of that book.
Yes.
Yeah. Which otherwise was a decent book. I'll give her that. Like, I like Area 51. I like history. It was a decent book until she crapped the bed at the end. It wasn't good. Yeah.
But one thing she did demonstrate is that what is the one chapter, the one piece of information that the press, as far as
they seized on that. Yeah,
was Roswell. So this was post Project Mogul. This was beyond any other alternative explanation. It was another theory of the month, as we would call them, the flavor of the day, that type of thing. And it was, again, what the press, as far as focused on. So thank you, Annie, for that much.
Yeah, and I guess listen, next, it's important to me that I get something, it's kind of the elephant in the room for me out of the way. And that is, people are very critical of some people who may have believed a witness at one point and later said that witness is not credible. And it has gone to extreme lengths to the point where another show host wound up one of his friendly listeners, I don't know. And there was this big Twitter thing earlier that you and Kevin Randall and everybody on my series are paid government disinformation agents. I don't believe that. I'm just telling you what people said. And this was revolving around, of course, your one-time association with, what's the witness here? Hold on 1 second.
Frank Kaufman?
Frank Kaufman, yes. Yeah. I even got an article here called Every Circus Needs a Clown, which is written by Timothy Printy. We're not going to go into that, but listen. I said to that person, Kevin Randall came on the series and talked about what happened there. He's already explained it, but if you would like to, because this person, listen, I don't like when people come on Twitter and crap all over my guests. That's slander to me. I said, show me a pay stub that Randall or Don Schmitt or CIA disinformation agents. It's crazy.
I'm still waiting for the check.
Yeah, me too. I'm apparently the mastermind behind this whole thing, Mr. Schmidt. So do you want to talk about this guy just so that we can clear the air about what happened with him and his inclusion in some of your material and your later? And to me, it takes a man to say, I made a mistake. We were misled. Here's what happened. And we disavow that person's testimony now. I think that shows you're human and that you're willing to accept that you made a mistake, because some guys would just double down and they wouldn't admit that was a problematic witness.
Like the skeptics, who it will never matter what the proof, no matter what the evidence, they will never accept it. because again, they are the ones demonstrating their preconceived position that anything but ET, but they will never accept that Roswell or any other case would demonstrate that not only we are not alone, but that we are being visited. They will draw the line there.
Sure.
So who are the most closed-minded? Who are the least objective? And who are the ones that, I mean, I've never crossed paths with Tim Prenti. I've never met him down in New Mexico. My God, I've been to New Mexico almost 200 times. We've talked to most of our witnesses face to face, and we're talking about over 600 that we've interviewed, either directly or indirectly involved over the last 32 years. They're just about all gone now. But we're the ones who made all that effort. We're the ones that have had the 5 archaeological digs at the crash site to find whatever we find. If we should
and
find
I just want to say, to your credit and Tom Carey's and Kevin Randall's and a few others, if you guys didn't go down there and chase, literally, I've heard you describe it as chasing the Undertaker. Mm-hmm. There's a time limit here, friends. These people are old, and most of them are dead now. But at the time when you started in the 80s, they were, a lot of the first-hand witnesses were still alive. Absolutely. So you and Tom Carey and Kevin Randall, you go racing down there to try to get on-record testimony from all these witnesses before they die. And if you guys hadn't done that, we wouldn't know half of what we know about this event.
And I don't think anybody could ever, prove that as a faulty statement, because we were the only ones doing it. When I first approached Stanton Friedman, who was a dear friend, and we often feuded, we were often at odds with one another, but it wasn't personal as much as it was just disagreeing on policy, disagreeing as far as investigative notes, that type of thing. Stan was not an investigator. He was not a researcher. He was an archivist.
Sure.
And so he would fall short. Like, Stan, you had a particular witness. Why didn't you tell me about that? I would have talked to them. I would have gone and actually interviewed them. Well, I didn't think it was that important. Well, it's all important, because if we can document their presence back in 47, if there's any chance that they may have been involved or they could lead us to somebody else, we can't just, well, now they're gone and we missed an opportunity. And I can't tell you, Stephen, how often we would find somebody and, they just died a year ago. We had one particular situation where we called and we're speaking to the wife, and she's asking if we could call back because she's just returning from the funeral.
Yeah, that's terrible.
And there's nothing more frustrating. And the skeptics have never been in that boat. They have no idea what it's like to have doors slammed in your faces, to have phones slammed in your ear. And the thought that you're spending all this time and effort when there was no internet 32 years ago. There was no Rolodex as far as her CD-ROM that you type in somebody's name and it would give you the address. We had to physically track these people down. We had to actually, as far as we did credit checks, we went through motor vehicle, we went through air certification, hoping that many of them who were pilots in the service would have continued licensing as far as private pilots, that type of thing. We would compile reunion lists. We used government computers at times, and we used a hacker with the VA who provided us with a lot of names and addresses. But we still did it. And sure, we were skirting the rules at times, because to us it was more important to find these people and to provide them with an opportunity to finally speak out while there was still time. And because, as you mentioned, Stephen, we were racing with the Undertaker. Well, anytime you're in a race, there's a good chance you're going to stumble and fall. Because it's one thing to be on the sidelines, hey, your stride isn't the way I like it, or you're going in the wrong direction, or you're going too fast, or you're going too slow. Well, why don't you come in the race? Why don't you get in here and follow? Or see if you can even catch up to me. And then let's see how you do. All this Monday morning quarterbacking as far as whether
I hear you. Yeah, I hear you. And we have a real problem right now with the younger generation of people that call themselves researchers, but all they do is I call them right-click researchers. If it's not on the internet, they can't. I'm amazed at the stuff I could find just by picking up the phone and people I could talk to. Nobody does that anymore.
When you speak to witnesses who become emotional, when you sit there, and there was a particular witness that we had worked on for over a year. When I say worked on, between his wife and Tom Carey and myself, just trying to get him to open up. And mind you, this is a witness who we can document. His pictures in the Roswell Army yearbook, 1947. So what's what the skeptic's going to say? Well, that doesn't prove they were there. Well, see, again, what are your standards? They're at the base, and still, well, you got to pull them out of the scenario because they can't be there because maybe they're legit. So they're there. We can document that. And the wife describes to us that we have not slept in the same bedroom for 40 years because of his nightmares, because he'll jolt up in the middle of the night over and over again, and he screams out, he yells out, because he can't get the face out of his mind. He can't get what he saw back at that hangar in Roswell back in 47 out of his memory. And then when he finally opens up and talks to us, and he sobs like a little boy, he cried. I mean, the tears just stream down his face. And these people who have never interviewed a witness in their lives would just sit back and go, well, he's a liar. He's a liar.
Yeah, I have to be honest with you in that we've had Mr. Korf on, and I just think he's too dismissive of all these witness testimonies having, and it seems to me that this whole series has been sort of a ping pong back and forth. It's like one researcher like Mr. Randall or you or Mr. Carey will say, I talked to this witness who said this. And then he says, no, they didn't say that. I have a quote that they didn't say that. But you guys have, recorded interviews and things. So there's a bit of a back and forth.
Where did they get the quote from? Where did they get the quote from? They took it off the internet. And I'll guarantee you it was taken.
Well, I haven't announced this yet, but what I'm going to do, Mr. Schmidt, after this series is over, is I'm going to go through your books, Mr. Randall's books, and your books with Tom Carey and Cal Korf's books, and for each person, I'm going to create a spreadsheet, and we're going to try to get to the bottom of each of the witnesses. So it'll be a little harder for him to just be dismissive and say they didn't say that, they said this, or to be so dismissive. One of your books that I really found fascinating was Children of Roswell, because I have a hard time believing that towards the end of their lives, a bunch of people just started making up stories about aliens or seeing aliens out in the desert and told their kids this.
There is not a skeptic alive that can rule out all of the Roswell deathbed testimonies, each and every one that are admissible in a court of law, and say that it only applies to witnesses who are describing details about Roswell, but yet then every other deathbed testimony is acceptable. We can't have it both ways. Can't have it both ways, but they want it both ways. I mean, you people would fail miserably in courts of law because you would say, well, I want to throw his testimony out because I don't like it. But sorry, then we got to throw out yours. We got to throw out your witnesses. Do you have any witnesses? And they would go, well, no, but isn't my word good enough? Well, no, you weren't there in 1947. Well, did you talk to any of the witnesses? Well, no, but my word is good enough. Well, were you ever in New Mexico? Well, no, but you have to take my word for it.
Yeah, and the other thing I guess I would say is that I would think that you guys, you, Mr. Randall and Mr. Carey, having interviewed so many witnesses, have gotten sort of a sense of whether people are being honest with you or not. And just quickly back to this Frank Kaufman.
Yes, I wanted you to.
Yeah, so he sort of came out with basically telling you and every other person interested in Roswell exactly a great story that you would want to hear. But later it turns out that he's not so credible. Can you talk a little bit about that?
When we first talked to Frank Kaufman in 1990, he presented himself as just a secondhand witness, that he was at the base, and he is in the base yearbook.
Sure.
He was there. We can establish his bona fides. And he stayed in Roswell. He would become the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Roswell for 30 years. And so he was a respected business person as well. And so we are referred to him, and he's talking secondhand, which evolves into, well, I saw this. I was involved with this aspect of the case. Eventually, where he becomes part of the recovery team, one of the 9, as he called it. And not only at firsthand to the remains of the craft, but also the bodies. And so anytime you have a potential firsthand witness to what is the meat of the case, the one thing that binds this, all together, you work even more diligently in establishing whether they're being truthful or not. And as a result, when we did CBS 48 Hours, and I was with Phil Jones, we allowed Jones to spend as much time with Frank Kaufman as he could, because we wanted a seasoned newsman, a senior reporter at CBS working right directly under Dan Rather at that time, to see what his impressions were, see if he could break him in any way. And then when we had the law firm in Washington, and 2 of their attorneys, one was a Shapiro, as I recall.
Sounds like a lawyer.
And I believe it's related to the Shapiro that represented O.J. Simpson, for that matter.
There you go.
Well, anyway, we allowed them to spend in private quarters hours with Frank Kaufman. So we're getting it from a legal standpoint, we're getting it from a media standpoint, and we even had other witnesses come and sit with Kaufman and exchange notes, and then walk away and then see, okay, Kevin and I would be on the receiving end. And one after the other, we were getting these glowing reports. Oh, couldn't break them, couldn't break Kaufman. Phil Jones, one of the best witnesses I've ever dealt with. He actually told us that. And like Kevin and Don, you guys are sitting on one of the biggest stories here of all time. And the fact that even at the end of that very segment on CBS 48 Hours, Dan Rather ends by stating, quote, "Truly something extraordinary crashed outside of Roswell, New Mexico in July of 1947, end quote.
Yeah, and this is Dan Rather saying this. This is a no slouch. Yeah.
That's CBS News, exactly. And so, yes, we spent a lot of time with Frank Kaufman, but the difference is we were the ones doing it. I don't remember that any of the skeptics ever came, except for Philip J. Klass, but then it was indirectly for us.
Yeah.
But as far as the others doing anything to prove that Kaufman was legit or not.
And did you have sort of a friendly relationship with Phil Klass, you guys? Like, you kind of knew, like, he's the yin to our yang. We can't hate the guy for believing something else, or trying to check our work or our research, right?
No,
it wasn't like contentious between you guys. You were on a lot of shows together and different things.
We even debated. Kevin and I were invited to their PSYCOP, when it was still PSYCOP, Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal, their annual convention at the Harvey Hotel in Dallas in, I believe, 1992. And Kevin backed out the week before because he felt we were going into a lion's den and they would eat us up. And I went alone. And
good for you, because you had to know that was going to be contentious, right?
It was originally, you had the entire audience, as well as Phil Klass was the moderator. And then the debate was originally to have been Robert Young, who I knew personally through correspondence. And then at the time, Captain James McGaha of the Air Force. And so I knew it would quickly turn into 3 against 1, because the main debater of the opposition then became Phil.
Yeah.
And I stood my ground, and I had reporters. I had a reporter from Associated Press that even felt that I had won the debate, because I stuck to the witnesses, I stuck to the issues, I stuck to what I could verify for, again, the people I had actually talked to. And all they could do is, well, they didn't really mean that, or they were fabricating, that testimony. And I know Kaufman came up, and at the time, I didn't consider him, I don't believe we considered him a star witness, but nonetheless, we kept investigating his information. And so we were the ones that after he passed away, now mind you, Stephen, after he had been diagnosed with terminal cancer, I went at my own personal expense. Now here's the other point. Kevin lives in Iowa. I live in Wisconsin. Kevin and I are in driving distance to one another. But New Mexico is
still not a cheap flight, yeah.
No, and it's still a 24-hour drive. So we're covering our phone expenses, which at the time, you were getting charged long distance by the minute. So we're
I remember, because I used to be calling BBSs in other countries, and then my father got the phone bill. And boy, was that was a tough time for me.
I was there, and our phone bills were averaging $1,000 a month between the two of us.
Wow.
And then we were making all these trips. We were going to New Mexico 5-6 times a year. We were going to state of Washington and Oregon and Montana and Minnesota and out to Washington and down to Florida and down to Kentucky and to New York and Michigan, Minnesota, Texas. We were going repeatedly. Wherever there were witnesses, we were going and interviewing them personally because we felt it was that important. And so, yeah, you can wave Kaufman at us like it's some mortal sin that disqualifies our entire investigation. But we were interviewing hundreds.
Yeah, and I consider it like the throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Okay, you've got one witness that fabricated that you can show, yeah, this guy fabricated his involvement, but that doesn't negate the other 500 or 600 witnesses that you talked to.
Of course not. And the main point being, who are the ones that proved Kaufman to be?
Yeah, actually, it was you guys that pretty much proved that he was fabricating, and then sort of backed away from it.
We were the ones who, at his home after he passed away, in his office, and I'm pulling out the desk drawers and I'm reaching under and seeing if there's any, and I find the satchel of all the original documents, and we found the old circa 1947 typewriter, and we found all the old, as far as the collection of the old onion skin paper, the parchment paper that he was using to create what appeared to be legitimate documents, that type of thing. He was forging signatures. He had a copy machine. He was doing cut and paste stuff. The point being, we did that. So we're policing ourselves. I don't need anybody again from their computer sitting there and saying, well, we should have, could have, would have. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I think you've explained it adequately. And like I said, I, for one, I said, you shouldn't have a problem with researchers who make mistakes and then try to correct them. The bigger problem is the people that double down when they know that, I can't tell you how many people that I've talked to, like just a quick example in particular, like somebody was using a convicted child molester as proof of an alien story. And I said, I'm sorry, but I don't think that a child molester is a credible witness and should be believed. And they went on with, still using him as a source. So I wanted to get to the...
Quickly, you make another good point. And I'm not going to reveal any names. I'm not going to even hint. But nonetheless, it was one of the skeptics years ago, in an effort to discredit one of the lady witnesses. She started to receive pornography, unsolicited, from this individual, with the hope that she would either accept or invite, and then he would turn it around and accuse her. Okay. I don't want to go any further, but again, those are the tactics that I've witnessed. Bill Brazo Jr. receiving a phone call on Christmas Eve in the presence of his gathered family, celebrating Christmas, and one of the skeptics calling up at 8 o'clock that evening calling him a liar and challenging him to come, and do some debate with him someplace. And you're a liar if you don't accept this challenge. You're a liar. And well, okay.
Yeah,
because again,
people pretty passionate about this one way or the other.
It's the tactics that they often have relied on. And if you or I would ever resort to such, an effort, tactics as far as to discredit a witness, I guess it says more about us.
Well, I wanted to go down some of the things that I talked about with our other guests and experts here. Specifically, I wanted to ask you about the debris and the debris switch and the famous photos. Mm-hmm. Because I believe from your books and Kevin Randall's books and Stanton Friedman that there's a claim that this debris in the famous photos is not what the actual wreckage was, that there was a cover-up. They brought in this weather balloon debris to show the press. And we have both Marcel and later Dubose, right, who claimed that there was actually a debris switch and that wasn't the actual Roswell debris that was shown in these famous photos. And again, we've had this ping pong thing going back and forth with our different experts. What's your take on the debris that's shown in these famous photos and the claims of a debris switch by both Marcel and Dubose?
Well, again, we were the ones. Ramey had long passed away. There, you're picturing Brigadier General Roger Ramey, who was head of the 8th Air Force. He was the very boss of the base commander at Roswell at that time, Colonel William Blanchard. So you're going up the chain of command. The skeptics paint this, and some of my colleagues even described that this was a press conference. This was not a press conference. There was only one reporter that was even allowed in the room. The rest were kept out in the hallway outside of Ramey's office. And the only reporter allowed in was James B. Johnson of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. He took the 4 pictures, 2 of Ramey and then 2 more of Ramey and his chief of staff, Colonel Thomas Dubose. Now, Dubose, and he's pictured to Ramey's right there.
Sure.
Dubose, who we interviewed and went down to Orlando, Florida, and met with him on a number of occasions, spoke to him numerous times over the phone. I have correspondence with him. I have a letter from him saying, I never saw the real material because we switched it. He stated in his own affidavit. Now, mind you, he's a 1-star general at this time. He's a brigadier general. So we have a brigadier general who says in a sworn affidavit, the balloon was a hoax. We were the ones who switched it. Shouldn't that be enough? Shouldn't that be the end of the story right there? Because there are no witnesses who claim that that was the genuine article who are still alive at that time. And so Irving Newton, who was the weather officer, he was in the last picture taken, and that was by the public information officer, Charles A. Cashin, who took that particular picture. He was just ordered over by Ramey to come identify the weather balloon. Is this a weather balloon? Well, of course it was. It's a weather device. So Newton made a positive identification of that wreckage. And it was flimsy foil. You see the black clump at the Ramey's foot. That was rotting neoprene rubber. In fact,
Yeah, and I've always had this huge problem with the fact that Army intelligence officers would see this out in the middle of a field and not know what it was.
Of course, yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me that seasoned Army Air Force people would not know what that was. That they would mistake it. In the famous quote, Marcel said, "What I saw was not made on this earth." Precisely. That's a far cry from something that's so common. They had to have seen weather balloons before, maybe even debris from weather balloons that crashed. Right?
Exactly. And where did the weather balloon come from? Where did this particular device actually come from? It came from Roswell. You know why? Okay. Because they were assembling and launching them twice a day in conjunction with bomb drop exercises outside the city limits. They would launch them from atop the bank building, which was 6 stories tall at that time. highest building in Roswell. So they were totally familiar with these devices. In fact, there's a picture in the Roswell base yearbook of the balloons hanging from rafters in one of the hangars.
Yeah, I've seen those pictures.
So there was no one more familiar with this balloon device than the personnel at Roswell.
That's where they were being launched from, majorly, right?
And you see the brown paper wrapping on the floor beneath the balloon.
Mm-hmm.
Sergeant Robert Porter, who was with the 715th Bomb Squadron, when that Marcel flight went out on that B-29 called Dave's Dream, it went out at 3 o'clock that afternoon, 3 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. Porter, they loaded up 3 shoebox-sized brown paper wrapped packages. In fact, in a couple of the shots, you see one of the shoebox-sized brown paper wrapped packages still by the heat register.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have. I just grabbed the most famous couple, but you're right. I've seen in the wider shots. These are cropped images, so
Now,
in the wider shots, yeah.
And when we asked Porter what was the shape and size of the final package loaded up, he said it was about 2.5 to 3 foot diameter, triangular in shape, brown paper wrapped, and loaded into the bomb bay. And that's the very angle you have from the kite. And there's the brown paper that had once wrapped this balloon. Came from Roswell. It was nothing more than an off-the-shelf weather balloon device that a 5-year-old child would have recognized. And General Ramey, if we want to go again via documentation, by 1:30 that afternoon, 2.5 hours before Marcel even arrives in Fort Worth, Ramey is fielding phone calls from the press, and he's describing the weather balloon already in his office.
That's convenient. It didn't arrive yet, but it was already there.
It's a matter of documented fact. You skeptics, go. It's in all the newspapers at that time. General Ramey is claiming that balloon device is already in his office hours before it supposedly arrives from Roswell.
Wow, I've never heard that before. That's new to me. And I wanted to ask you, of course, about your thoughts on the Ramey memo and some people's attempt to decipher what was actually written. And again, there was something in his hand here, and it's been called the Ramey memo. This is a bad picture, but there's another picture where you can almost see what's written on the image, and people have blown it up, tried to get scans of the negatives.
This image for a second here. I want to just touch on it.
Yeah. It's tantalizing because even in this, it seems like you can almost read it, right?
That's General Ramey's thumb. Look at the thumbnail.
Okay.
It's got a jagged rip at the tip. You see how his thumbnail is torn?
Yeah. What's the significance of that?
What's significant is that he also has his tie on. He still has his cap on in his own office. This came together so quickly that even opening up that balloon and ripping it to shreds, again, this is speculation on our part, but it suggests how.
Oh, yeah, he could have screwed up his nails, ripping stuff up, right?
That he didn't even have time to repair his nail.
That's another thing I've never heard before.
It also, again, if I would have forensic experts look at this, those are the things that they would look at. They would look at, if you look at the shots of the balloon, let's look out the window. You can see that the pictures are taken at different times of day based on the shadow coming through the window. That's why we know. That's why we know that Marcel was photographed first. And he was not photographed by a reporter. He was photographed by, again, the public information officer, Charles Cashin. And then he was ordered by Ramey not to say a word to any of the press out in the hallway. He was to
Interesting.
just report back to as far as his headquarters overnight. They kept him overnight, and he doesn't return back to Roswell till the next evening. They keep him as far as under essentially cloak and dagger for the next 2 days.
Yeah, well, the story died pretty quickly once they threw up the weather balloon explanation, right?
As planned.
Yeah, and what do you think of the validity of some people's deciphering of what's on this memo? Do you think that's really valid, or do you think that it's a case of people seeing what they want to see in some cases?
I know David very well, and I have the highest regard for his research. I'm talking about Dr. David Rudiak.
Sure.
And mainly for the fact that nobody has spent more time working on the Ramey memo than Rudiak has.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not just talking about an afternoon of analysis. We're not just talking about doing a certain magnification and some new as far as electronic enhancement of the image. And let me tell you what I believe it says after looking at it for all of a couple hours. Rudiak has spent years. And for that reason, I place not my hope as much as my greatest faith in his analysis and his discernment of what it says. But today, because we still have this dispute, this argument, and whenever I hear someone say, well, we have done all we can with the original negative. Well, there's one analysis that we've yet to do. And you learn this for those of us who've relied on flight control that handle respective airspace between commercial airports. In the Midwest, for example, here, where I reside in Wisconsin, our flight control center is in Aurora, Illinois, which handles 7 states throughout the Midwest. And it's not human interpretation of a radar signal, it's computer interpretation. It separates weather anomaly to actually transponder aircraft and then private aircraft as either a solid green blip or as a plus or as a minus or red, green or red, that type of thing. But nonetheless, it's 90 screens, radar screens, all computer analyzed, all computer interpreted. What I have been recommending for years is that we need to create a program that will read the document. There are only 26 possibilities as far as letters go. And then if we apply the question as to what type of military jargon would have been used in a telex at that time, and that they have to be as far as grammatically correct sentences, that type of thing. Let's let a computer analyze the memo and accept it as the final word. No more human interpretation. In other words, let's let AI see what it can do with the document as best as possible, as best as it can, and then with a joint acceptance that this will be the final say. It's as far as we can go.
Yeah, I agree. That thing has always been tantalizing to me because I've always thought, like, I heard Mr. Randall say if that photographer was standing 3 feet closer, we'd know exactly what that memo said. But I think that image analysis software, and you're right, AI brought to bear against a problem like that may be the best solution, because then we take the human equation out of it, and we're not, a machine's not going to be biased. It's going to pick it apart, and this is what it says or doesn't say, and that's it.
And it's not faces in the clouds, because letter-wise, there are only 26 possibilities. And then they have to become as far as complete words, and then they have to be as far as make complete sentences. It has to all make sense.
Yeah.
So it narrows the scope. It narrows the scope to the point that I still believe that there's this final effort that needs to be done. And I pretty much got the idea from Studio Macbeth with Ray Downing in New York when they were doing the 3D imagery of the Shroud of Turin. And they were running into the exact same problem that we run into with the Ramey memo, that as we enhance the image, you also enhance the noise. In the Shroud's case, they were exaggerating the fabric, the weave of the fabric. And in the photograph, we're enhancing the grain. So they developed a computer program that would shave layer by layer away that fabric.
I remember, yeah, it was a special algorithm that they designed just to clean out the noise.
Right.
Separate the noise from what the data they wanted.
Do that, right. And we've yet to do that with the Ramey memo. We need to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting because I have a background in computer science, but even I wouldn't know where to begin with that. But I have some friends that might. So, yeah, I can ask around and see what people think. Good. I happen to have a DVD or a CD-ROM somewhere of that high-quality scan of this thing, and I've never done anything with it. Next, I wanted to talk to you a bit about what I believe is probably my favorite book you've written, because to me, it's just so convincing, and that is this Children of Roswell book. Again, some of the skeptics and even Mr. Korf have been here and been very dismissive of the witnesses, saying, well, they lied, they exaggerated, even, going so far as to say, well, some people may exaggerate. Marcel his son said, sometimes he exaggerated. I don't know. But I thought that most skeptics are just so dismissive of the witness testimony, or they completely discount secondhand testimony. And I think they should all read this book, Children of Roswell, because to me, that's what made me a believer again, going, why, especially my father was in the military. He didn't have a tendency to just make up BS stories, especially near his death, So one of the things so convincing to me in the book is that some of these people were threatened, intimidated, harassed, or whatever, and they kept quiet about some of these events. And then later in life, they talked more openly about it. Can you talk a little bit about some of the children of Roswell?
Of course. Just imagine either one of us being in this situation where our father is lying on a gurney as they are making final preparations to take him in to the OR for open heart surgery. And he's very frail, and there's a very good chance that he's not going to survive. And he waves us over before they put him to sleep. And he says, I need to tell you something that happened while I was still in the service. And it relates to when I was stationed at Roswell in 1947. And then they go on to describe that I was part of the recovery team. I not only saw the remains of this ship that was not a plane. It was not a rocket. It didn't have wings or a tail section. And the material defied anything I've ever seen since. And then to see the bodies that we first thought were children. And as we got closer, my God, they're not from here. And then there was a survivor. One was still living. Now, that happened between Sergeant Homer Rowlett, who was with the 683rd Squadron, and his daughter, Carleen Green. Now, what are we going to say? It was a deathbed statement, as it turned out. Well, sweetheart, dear, come over. Let me tell you one last big whopper yet before I die.
Yeah, that's why I don't find this dismissive attitude of skeptics towards these people to be plausible or probable.
Because again, if we throw out Roswell deathbeds, we have to throw out all of them. And
yeah, and also, you only gave one example from your book. Yeah. Your book is filled with these sorts of secondhand accounts from children of people that were directly involved with the Roswell event. And in your book, you didn't just accept their word. You went and checked that their father or the person that told them this actually was there, stationed there. You checked their military records.
Exactly, and was witnessed by others who were also involved. And yes, Rowlett was there in the field with us. He was there. He was involved. And then Rowlett had actually told his son the identical story before he went into the hospital. So he made sure that his son also knew, unbeknownst to his sister. Edwin Easley was the provost marshal. When Kevin and I tracked him down, Kevin spoke to him the first time over the phone. Again, mind you, this is in 1990. He's a retired lieutenant colonel living in the Dallas area. And over again, he kept telling Kevin, no matter what he asked him about 1947, I can't talk about that. I'm still sworn to secrecy. Were you out at the crash site? I can't talk about that. I'm still sworn to secrecy. Okay, yeah, Colonel, you're sworn to secrecy over a weather balloon after 43 years. So he agreed to receive a copy of our first book, UFO Crash at Roswell. And Kevin and I would wait some months thereafter, and we were at the office in Chicago at CUFOS, at the Center for UFO Studies. And we agreed, why don't we call up Colonel Easley and see if he's read the book, see if he had a change of heart. And Kevin's speaking to him once again, and he, again, same response. Can't answer that. I'm still sworn to secrecy. So then Kevin, we had it planned. Kevin asks Colonel Easley, well, you see which direction the witnesses are taking us. You see which direction the investigation is going. Can you tell us if we're going in the right direction? And there's a bit of a pause, and Colonel Easley comes back. Well, let's just say you're not going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I found that very compelling when Mr. Carey talked about it as well. Yeah, I mean,
he didn't admit, anything, but he still told us, without giving away without breaking his oath. He still told us all that he could without being direct about his involvement.
So, yeah, I once had a government employee tell me, I can't tell you that, but I can tell you where to look for it. And he was right. He was right. He couldn't violate his NDAs and his secrecy agreements, but he could tell me where to look for it, and I found where I was looking for it.
And that's how they do it. That's how they have their plausible deniability.
Yeah.
So 2 years later, Easley is dying of stomach cancer at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, same hospital that John F. Kennedy was taken to. And in the presence of his two daughters, one of them being Nancy Strickland, who is a practicing attorney, his granddaughter brings him a gift, walks up to his hospital bed and holds it up to his face, and he turns away and goes, "Oh, the creatures," and then explains that the president had asked them, whether through a direct request or some representative, but nonetheless, the president asked us never to talk about this again. I kept my word. I can't tell you how I regret that I was never able to tell you what happened back in Roswell in 1947. But it was all true. It did happen. The granddaughter had held up a copy of our book, UFO Crash at Roswell, to his face.
So there's another deathbed confirmation that the alien hypothesis just may be correct.
The creatures. And that from the very provost marshal who was in charge of all military security on the base at that time. You have the base adjutant, another retired lieutenant colonel, Patrick Saunders, who, when I spoke to him the first time, he just laughed. Oh, the little green men from Mars, no truth to it at all. And then before he dies, he had fallen off of a roof. And that was in 1995. And he knew he only had so much time to live. And he had purchased as many paperback copies of our second book, Truth About UFO Crash at Roswell, that he could. and he gave them out to his best friends and to his family. And I don't know if I have the quote exact, but it was basically on the inner leaflet of the book. He wrote, "Here's the truth. I never told anybody before. I kept my word. Pat."
Wow, that's interesting.
Again, if I'm a detective, an intelligence investigator, if I'm any legitimate investigator who is just allowing the evidence take me to whatever the final resolution is, how could I just dismiss that and say, well, he was just lying? He was just, again, pulling all their legs. One last joke while he was still, here. Easily, all the creatures, he was just having a quick laugh at the expense of his 2 daughters and his granddaughter.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. And the volume of the witnesses and even though they're secondhand witnesses, I still found that book to be really compelling. It was one of those that I couldn't put it down until I finished the whole book, and then I was sad that it was over when I was done reading it. So,
and some of them, like Frankie Dwyer, who was the daughter to the fire crew chief, Dan Dwyer, stationed at Roswell, and her having actually held in her hands a piece of the memory material. And the fact that we can document the fact that she had her tonsils taken out days before. She had a dental appointment that very afternoon. She stopped at the firehouse to visit with her dad. Her dad wasn't there because he and another fireman by the name of Ed Reeves were north of town at the crash site. They drove out one of their own personal vehicles to go check out all this talk about this crash, that took place just north of town. And Frankie's at the firehouse, and who should walk in but a state police officer by the name of Robert Scroggins, whose district happened to be Lincoln County, where the Brazel debris field is located. Mac Brazel, the ranch foreman, who first reported the crash when he went to the sheriff's office, Sheriff George Wilcox, who then in turn reported it to the Roswell Army Airfield. Now, this is something else I would challenge the skeptics with. It's a 4th of July weekend. Most of the men are either at home with their families, they're away on leave. It's a holiday weekend. The rancher comes into town on Sunday, July 6th. Again, matter of documented fact. It's important enough that when the lead intelligence officer, Major Jesse Marcel, and because he's with the 509th Bomb Group, it's the first atomic bomb squadron in the world, the elite within the military at that time, the best officers, the best pilots, the best crewmen, the best doctors, the best nurses. It was a composite unit. They selected the best from whatever particular branch you happened to be in at that time. And they were going to be part of the first atomic bomb squadron. If you swept a broom on that base back in 1947, it was because you were the best broom sweeper.
Yeah, I was going to say they probably had the best janitors too. Yeah.
Because you all had top security clearances. Everyone on that base had a top security clearance. So this rancher brings in this wreckage. The sheriff calls up and says, I have all this strange material down here. This rancher brought in from some debris field, some crash site up in Lincoln County. It's not our jurisdiction. But, what do you guys know about this? You need to know that something crashed out there. Well, it's important enough for what we remain convinced is the actual reason, because it wasn't a weather balloon or an aircraft or anything else recognizable. The fact that they alert the base commander who's at his home, it's important enough that they disturb him on a holiday weekend. to show him this wreckage. And it's important enough for him that he doesn't just send a couple of low-ranked grunts, a couple of enlisted men, just go check it out, see what you find. No, he sends out his head of intelligence and he sends out his head of counterintelligence in the event it's something foreign, because nobody can identify this wreckage. I defy any skeptic to demonstrate why they would have sent out the counterintelligence lead officer. For no other reason except for the fact that unless it was a foreign design and they needed someone who would recognize that, would be able to identify that. No other reason to send him out there. But yet he was.
Yeah, he may be familiar with Russian or German or foreign aircraft, right?
And the point is,
a regular intelligence officer.
Exactly. And the head of counterintelligence, Captain Sheridan Cabot, he even admitted to the Air Force Colonel Richard Weaver that he was sent out there. He was out there. Marcel identified him for being out there. Master Sergeant Louis Rickett, who was Cabot's subordinate, said that Cabot was out there. The point being, you sent out some of your highest ranking officers because, again, you're demonstrating how important this potentially was in their eyes at that time. And it wasn't just driving out of town a few miles and checking it out. It was at that time a 4-hour drive one way. And by the time they got out there, it was dusk. They had to spend the night in that old Heinz house in that one-room shack, and it wasn't until the next morning. And then they spend the better part of a day filling up the 2 vehicles. And it's important enough that Marcel, on his way back to the base, his home outside of, within the Roswell city proper limits at that time, is 10 miles away from the base. He wakes up his wife, Riyadh, and his son, Jesse Jr., at 2 o'clock in the morning, takes them to the kitchen, and he's got all this wreckage scattered on the floor because he wanted to show them what he knew.
And I doubt he would have showed them a weather balloon or even bothered to stop if it was simply a weather balloon. That's another point of the story that's always bothered me.
Now, let's even quickly go back to even the ranch itself. When Kevin and I were out there the first time, and we went to the actual ranch headquarters, the main ranch house, and there was a water tank just full of water, but you could look over the side and there were just big chunks of rubber and foil and other debris floating throughout this water tank. The tank probably was about 15 feet in diameter, as I recall. It's no longer there. And when we asked the ranch foreman, his name was Jeff Wells at that time, what is all this? And he goes, oh, it's all the balloons that have been recovered here for decades.
Throw them in a water tank?
Water tank.
That's interesting.
Because they weren't burning. Because it was rubber and foil. The foil didn't burn and that type of thing. So they just tossed them in. So the point is, they knew they were weather balloons. Even the ranchers knew what they were dealing with. And they were typically tagged that they were offering a $5 reward for the instrument box if there was an instrument package of any sort.
Yeah, it's cheaper than making another one, right?
So they would turn in the instrument box and they'd collect $5, $10, that type of thing. Well, what should we do with the balloon? Trash it. We don't need it. We can't reassemble and fly it again anyway. So there was this water tank at the very ranch, just overflowing with all the balloons that have been recovered through the decades. So, so we're asked to believe that all the ranchers in the area, a state police officer,
firemen, Air Force intelligence,
the sheriff, the deputies, and then the base commander and his 2 leading intelligence officers. Nobody can identify this common off-the-shelf material. I don't care if you want to claim it's mogul or this radio sound balloon, which was their original second explanation. It's still nothing more than neoprene rubber, reflective foil, wooden sticks, string, and tape.
Yeah,
I do
I
no
think they would
challenge.
be able to identify. This has always bothered me. When I talk to a skeptic and they say, "Well, the government, it was a mogul balloon," they admitted it later. Well, okay, but like all these Air Force intelligence people would know a weather balloon, and I didn't even think about. You're right. The ranchers would be familiar with it. The firemen would have seen these things before. I wanted to talk for a bit about where both, if you believe that both material and bodies and maybe even a living alien were recovered, where they went to, because we had an alien scientist who's a physicist and very interested in the materials, and he did a lot of he showed me a lot of research and things that I've never seen about where the material may have went in the form of Battelle Institute and some other places, because that's beyond FOIA. Where do you believe the material went and ultimately ended up, and the bodies or aliens?
Well,
This is important.
we always need to keep in mind that the military / government doesn't manufacture anything. Everything is contracted out into the private sector. Every ship, every plane, every tank, every rifle, you name it.
That's why it's called the military-industrial complex, because it's complicated.
Which I very aptly warned us about, because when I'm asked today, Don, where do you believe the material is? I say the military no longer has it. The government no longer has it. It is all in private possession today.
Which happens to be beyond FOIA requests, so that's convenient.
Exactly. And so you're talking about, you mentioned Battelle Institute. You're talking about Rand Corporation. You're talking about General Electric. You're talking about Hughes Aircraft. You're talking about Boeing. You're talking about Bureau Standards. We've had first-hand witnesses at all of these locations. And so isn't it interesting that even today when we hear about the government being in possession of physical material, but where is it? And they point like the Bigelow Aerospace in Las Vegas, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. They still point to the private sector. Well, we know of it, but we gave it to them for testing. And it was a case of, well, give us another 6 months and we'll give you some answers. Oh, we need another year. And, eventually, we don't know what you're talking about. We have this, you turn this over to us. And because, the attrition, rate, of things changing hands and different people come into the scenario. And before you know it, things slip between the cracks. And just like that, they're gone. Nobody knows where part A, part B, and so on are even located any longer. There's no paper trail, so to speak.
Well, didn't all of the, when they did that big Roswell, the Air Force did that final Roswell case close investigation, they found that all of the paperwork was somehow disappeared. All of the paperwork for the Roswell actual crash event that should have been archived and kept all these years is just conveniently gone, or most of it is.
Or so we're told.
Yeah.
And the thought that, first of all, the most sensitive, most top secret base in the world at that time, the Roswell Army Airfield, first atomic bomb base in the world, that their records would somehow have been destroyed, whether there was a UFO crash or not. The very thought that you're talking about the most crucial military facility in the world and somehow the records all get destroyed. How convenient. And at the time of the flying saucer story.
Even just a tragedy of history, because, the Enola Gay and the first atomic bomb drop and everything, all took place at the base. So you would think just for history's sake, they should have kept everything.
Of course. And the Enola Gay and then the second B-29 boxcar were even hangared at Roswell after 1945. So the thought that, I know, and that's how the General Accounting Office, when they accepted that explanation, when they did the document search through all the branches of the military, as well as departments of intelligence, they had to accept that they came up empty-handed. But I, for one, don't believe that is the case. I don't believe that the records were destroyed. As we've been able to name, for example, all the photographers that were brought into Roswell that kept a storyboard record of just every second of that recovery operation. All the photographs, all the film, all the testimonies that would have been.
That's something else that alien scientists found that I missed, and the fact that they didn't use the base photographers they brought in. Why would you fly in outside photographers to photograph weather balloons?
Why would you bring in outside doctors, outside nurses? Why would you bring in outside MP units? Why would you bring in, as far as all these outside officers that came in? And you know, Stephen, when we were doing our initial searches for crucial witnesses, and we focused like on the 1395th, which was the MP squadron at the base in 47, thinking that, well, certainly all the base security would have been involved, whether they were cordoning off as far as the outside roads or the perimeter of the site itself, and the transportation, the vehicles coming in and out, and the security on the base. Well, and then when we were finding these people and learning that most of them were never involved, and finding that there were units that came in from other bases.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Well, but then it did make sense for this reason, because it was something that, again, is standard procedure within the military.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you think this was done for compartmentalization purposes?
Exactly.
So that, yeah.
Exactly, because when the dust clears, you have 95% of the personnel at Roswell who have been shut out. They have been banned from any involvement. They've been told to stay out of it. They've been told, don't report to the base hospital. Don't report to your normal sentry duty at building P3, building 84, which all the wreckage and the bodies transited through, that type of thing. They were not ordered shoot to kill. So in case somebody actually was fatally wounded, that they'd have to live with that. They'd have to fraternize and still coexist with the same personnel on the base. When you have outside people that come in and take charge, and after everything is quiet, there is nobody to talk to, nobody to exchange notes with, because they've all gone home. They've all split up, and they don't have anyone to talk to once they return back to their normal assignments. So it's really, when you think about, quite ingenious, because it's the compartmentalization, it's the way of shutting down all the buzz, all the rumors. It's the way of preventing this minutia of talk, evolving into the point that you lose control of it. And I say I'm one MP that's assigned from one barrack. And I go back, I report, I finish my line of duty for the day, and I go back. I have nobody to talk to. Who's going to corroborate what I just experienced? But if the whole unit was sent in, just imagine. You got 50 men all describing the same thing, talking, sharing, their perspectives, their comprehension of what they had just experienced, that type of thing. So it is the total compartmentalization of the military. And that's why secrets are able to be kept, because it's the same reason they don't tell the president anything more than they have to.
Sure.
Because he's part of that. He's also part of that compartmentalization. The less the president knows, the safer he is.
Yeah, plausible deniability sometimes. Look at Iran-Contra. Yeah, he just said, well, my advisors didn't tell me they were doing that, so I'm not responsible. Then when you get to the alien bodies, which is always the big crazy part of the story, is this other crash site and recovered bodies and maybe even a live alien. Where do you believe they would have taken both the live alien and the cadavers? We've
had first-hand witnesses, not only photographers like Frederick Benthal that was brought in to take pictures of the bodies out at the actual crash site. We've had first-hand witnesses at hangar P3 within that B-29 hangar, and we've had first-hand witnesses at the base hospital. And also first-hand as well as second-hand family members, again, describing the survivor. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Marion Magruder was a triple ace in World War II. And he was part of the War College class of 47, 48. And he would tell his 5 sons independently, before he died in 1995, that they were assigned to write Patterson at a certain point. And they were shown wreckage. The War College, his particular class, they were shown some of the wreckage from Roswell. They were able to handle it. He described the exact same properties that, many of our other witnesses, the memory, the fiber optics, that type of thing. And then they were taken into another room and the lights came on, and behind a glass wall sat what clearly was something not human.
Interesting.
And they were told it was the survivor from Roswell. He felt very sympathetic towards it. He felt as though we were treating it like a captured animal in many respects. And we were then able to document. We have the documents. He was assigned to write Patterson in April of 1948. So in other words, just 10 months later.
Yeah, this is really interesting and amazing to me, like that we may have had a living alien in our custody, And I've heard various stories that the alien sort of telepathically communicated or something like that.
I know.
He knew his fate, like his comrades were gone, and
And we've heard that even from, what they would call the abduction, experiences, where the abductees feel that they have received telepathic communication with these beings. So that it would appear to be consistent with what we've heard as far as with Roswell, with the survivor, that they felt that there was some type of communication that took place telepathically. I don't usually go into those areas because, again, that's so subjective.
Yeah, and it's a lot of speculation sometimes too. Yeah. But why do you believe that they would have shown off the alien to these other officers?
Because it was the war.
For what purpose?
Yeah,
because it was the War College and it was the best and the brightest.
Yeah, and those classes, what they're being trained in specifically is foreign espionage. They're beyond as far as our regular intel officers here within the States. What the War College intel officers then is that they then work undercover within foreign circles, and they secure as much information and they spread as much disinformation as possible. In other words, they keep things very fluid as to hardcore information. And I believe that they wanted another opinion. They wanted, as far as the best and the brightest, as you said, as you described, Stephen, of these officers, because it demonstrated that they were still looking for answers. There was nothing in the Army Field Manual back in 1947 or 48 or 1950 or 1960 how to deal with this. And so I'm sure they brought in a lot of the brightest.
I could imagine that they would be concerned that this was some kind of a recon force ahead of an invasion, with the paranoia of the time. Now, back to the cadavers, though, I was curious to see if you've ever been given some kind of indication about who actually was involved with any autopsies or examination of the bodies. And, because I would assume that for any doctor or pathologist or coroner, that would be like the greatest event in their lifetime, getting to look at a body from an extraterrestrial. And I would imagine that something had a leak from the people involved with the cadavers.
And the late Leonard Stringfield, who was a collector living in Cincinnati, Ohio, He's on the opposite end of the state, but nonetheless, Dayton, Ohio, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, he was right there. And so he was listening. He had, that I'm aware of, at least 2 firsthand doctors who described to him autopsies at Wright Field in 1947. We would only hear of certain attempts, and the thing is, at Roswell, at the Roswell Base Hospital, they didn't have the equipment. They didn't perform autopsies there at the base. They didn't have a coroner in Roswell. They relied.
So they would have to fly them somewhere else, and what better place than the Foreign Technology Division at Wright-Patterson, right?
Exactly.
Doesn't get more foreign than extraterrestrial bodies, I would assume.
I couldn't agree more. And so, and that too, the fact that we have firsthand witnesses such as General Arthur Exon, even Colonel Robert Friend. Robert Friend was the second last director of the Air Force's Project Blue Book. And I was having dinner with him one time in Los Angeles, and he goes, Don, I don't think many of you even know that I was at Wright Field in 1947 when that wreckage from Roswell came in. And I went, oh, the mogul balloon that they had a test to make sure that it was really a balloon? And he laughed and he says, you and I both know that wasn't any type of balloon. And I go, oh, Colonel, then what was it? And he goes, well, I believe it was a broken arrow, an errant atomic bomb. And I let him, talk out as far as why he believed that. What the colonel wasn't aware of was the fact that there were no broken arrows at that time. In fact, we didn't have any bombs in our arsenal at that time.
Yeah, I guess we blew our load in World War II and we were still building up new ones, right?
That's right. We were still conducting as far as atomic research at Los Alamos in New Mexico. The bomb racks were kept not in Roswell. They were kept at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio. And even when they were conducting the bomb drop exercises with their B-29s in Roswell, they were using sand barrels. They didn't even have the bomb casings. And as far as the 2 bomb pits, which were at the base in 1947, neither one of them had a bomb hidden as far as down within that silo.
Yeah, and our adversaries wouldn't know this. It was just a huge deterrent. They knew that we had done Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and they would have assumed that we had more. So I guess
absolutely, and that's why they kept it so secret.
Well, but I don't really want to keep you too much longer, but if you don't mind, we have a great audience watching. If you don't mind, we can take some questions for you from our live chat. It's not often that we get some experts. Absolutely. So any questions for Mr. Schmidt or myself, just put them in all caps so that we know that they are intended for him. You can ask anything. And again, I want to thank you for doing this. It's been my pleasure to have all of you guys here because and no matter what side people are on, we've had Cal Korff, who's very skeptical and dismissive. We've had you and Mr. Randall and even Walter Bosley with the Zone thoughts on what may have crashed at Roswell. It's great to get you guys all in one place. Okay, here we go. This is a great question. Any speculation about why it crashed?
Mm-hmm. We have confirmed that the very night, July 2nd, through the Stallion Weather Lookout Center that evening, that there was a severe lightning storm that came off of the southern tip of the Capitan Mountains. And so even the ranchers described to us that between the thunderclaps, now this is high desert, been out there many times, you don't want to get caught out there in a storm because the lightning strikes the ground. If you're out there in a car, you're the highest, as far as a point, you're a lightning rod standing out there, and it's high desert. And so one of the theories is that it was struck by lightning. Again, we have no way, all we can do is confirm there was a severe lightning storm. but we still don't know if it was an internal malfunction, something caused it to explode. I guess we'll never know. We'll never know. But that much I can at least document, that the night in question, there was a severe lightning storm.
Yeah, could be it. And again, from Greg Chase, we have a question. What is your opinion of gravity-controlled vehicle tech, or I suppose he means anti-gravity technology, as being man-made?
Interesting that even in General Nathan Twining's letter to General George Shogren, asking about their assessment of the situation. Now, this is 2 months after Roswell. They were already speculating that the aircraft that Twining states in this letter is real, that the phenomenon is real and not visionary or fictitious.
Yeah, I love that memo. I love that memo.
Well, here's something, Stephen, that most ufologists don't even grasp. If you actually have a chance to ever see the originals, Twining did not write that letter. He signed off. He agreed with the context of the letter. But you know who prepared the letter?
No,
all of his nuts and bolts engineers at Wright Field at that time. At Air Material Command.
That makes it even more believable that that's accurate.
Engine experts, propeller experts, as far as materials experts. So nuts and bolts guys. So why are you calling in nuts and bolts guys if you're only dealing with sighting reports, if you're only dealing with a couple photographs? Why is it possible you're dealing with nuts and bolts people because they're actually dealing with the nuts and bolts of the recovered saucer that was just brought to your attention right there at Wright Field? So, but the point being, Twining, they were already speculating that the propulsion may be electromagnetic, that it would draw power right out of the very atmosphere. And doing that, and I use the example, if you take something as simple as a balloon and you create static, rub it against your arm, and then hold it up against the wall, and the balloon will defy gravity. It'll hang as far as up against that wall or against the ceiling from the static electricity. Well, it's anti-gravity, electromagnetic. You're creating electromagnetic field of sorts. So I believe that was the birth of some of that research, the idea that these craft are able to push off of gravity, repel gravity. They hover, and then they push off of it and are able to accelerate at a tremendous speed. And in using, even as far as the orbital rotation, the gravity of the planet itself, that they use it as their very propulsion. And therein would lie that and we've been working on this, and I believe we're getting closer and closer. And I belong to the EAA as far as the Experimental Aircraft Association in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. And when they unveiled the Raptor, the F-35s, and you see that jet hover, you see it come up and it turn its nose up, and all at once it's just bouncing, it's resting on its thrusters.
Yeah, I've seen a video of that. It's pretty impressive.
And then all at once it kicks in the afterburners and like a rocket shoots straight up. Just amazing. Now that's not anti-gravity, but we're getting there. We are getting to the point that we understand. And who is to say that the main inspiration may indeed have been the very phenomena that they're still saying doesn't exist?
Yeah, I always found it interesting that in the early 1950s, almost all of the major aircraft manufacturers were really big. There's articles and things on electrogravitic research. And then shortly after that, it just all vanished. And nobody talked about it again.
All goes underground, now it's become too top secret, too sensitive. And I suppose in many respects it becomes covert because you don't want to play your hand. The idea that we may have such aircraft today, and it's the last thing we want the Soviets or the Chinese to even, be aware that we possess.
Yeah. Another question, can Mr. Schmitt review, if any, findings at the sites? I think maybe they're talking about these archaeological digs, right, and you have a whole book on that. Can you talk about what exactly was found? Was there any promising evidence found during all those archaeological digs? Because I thought for a while, when I heard that they were doing that, I remember when I first heard about that, it was a long time ago, but I thought maybe there was something left there and they're going to find it. And maybe we'll get a smoking gun piece of it.
Now, just imagine, as you yourself acknowledged, that Kevin Randall and I were skeptics our first trip to New Mexico in February of '89. By that September, we're that hot on the case that we are supervising the first archaeological dig at the debris field site, the Brazil site on the Foster.
It's quite a turnaround from skeptic to running an archaeological dig, right?
We had a team from the Center for UFO Studies, and we had archaeologists from Argonne Laboratories in Illinois, and we mapped out the site using a theodolite, a survey meter. We laid out a systematic grid. We flagged areas of potential entrapment. We got ready with the hope that with funding, we'd be able to come back and conduct a full-scale, archaeological dig. Well, we approached in 1995, 6 years later, the Contract Archaeology Department at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. And that was Dick Chapman was the head of the department at that time. And with the hope that they would be willing to even do the dig, that we would have a university as far as sponsored dig.
Sure, yeah.
No less a UFO crash site. And they accepted, they agreed. Well, we still had to come up with the money. So in 2002, so 7 years later, with the Sci-Fi Channel, that's when we went in and we did the full-scale dig, second one. But we were able to go in with a backhoe, and it's an area that witnesses had described a furrow, a gouge, after the military recovery had been completed. And it was about 10 foot wide, hundreds of feet long, but it had filled in through the years. It was no longer visible from the surface. So we flagged that site where witnesses, again, independent of one another, told us they saw that furrow. And the backhoe operator, he's even an archaeologist. He's worked over in Egypt. He's worked in Africa and other areas. He's got the touch, as they would say. He works with a ground engineer, and even the engineer said that when they were digging perpendicular to the flagged gouge area, that the shovel was jumping like it was hitting loose sediment. And when it was pulled aside, there it was, just below the surface, a symmetrical V, exactly where the eyewitnesses said it was.
And so I guess
something
it was
impacted.
filled in later?
So something had actually skipped across the ground, and that the wind and rain erosion had filled it all in through the decades.
With new sediment,
there it was, below the surface. Now, since that time, we had another dig in 2006. We had another one in 2013, and another one in 2015. And with assistance from a geologist, Frank Kimbler, who was working this site quite diligently with just his metal detector in finding fragments, metal fragments, and were analyzed, and some of them turned out to be mostly aluminum, but with one strange alloy that shouldn't be there, and that was lithium.
Okay. And that's not a very common thing to mix with aluminum, right?
No, because it's mixed strictly with steel. It's a hardening agent for steel. And as a result, there's not a registered combination of the two that we know of, that we could find anywhere here on planet Earth. Now, again, it doesn't prove it's extraterrestrial. No, we agree. But it's interesting. It's
Did they do any tests on the isotopic ratio of the aluminum?
Oh, yes.
Because we should be able to. But
yes.
So it came back earthly.
Well, except for the molybdenum. The molybdenum, I pronounced it wrong the first time. Molybdenum, and it was 3%. Doesn't sound like a lot, but that is a lot in conjunction with the aluminum, because it should make it as brittle as glass, as a hardening agent for steel, and yet there it is.
Well, that's
now,
interesting.
we didn't claim it was there, but 3 separate labs have, doing the radioisotope testing, have confirmed its presence.
Interesting.
So I know on the History Channel.
Yeah, I remember seeing that, and I was on the edge of my seat, like, what are they going to find? You know.
And then they claim that they're picking up something buried beneath the surface that is sending back, it's creating a magnetic signal. It's repelling as far as that subterranean radar. And then the Ben Smith, the CIA operative, former CIA operative, suggests, you mean like a balloon? Okay. Well, I wish they would have talked to us, because if we go back to the Ramey photographs in General Ramey's office, and that rotted clump of rubber at his feet on his office floor, if you were to know anything about weather balloons, especially those particular balloons, the rubber, especially when exposed to the elements, starts to break down within days.
Yeah, it wouldn't be there 40 years, 50 years later.
Within weeks, it becomes like powder. And the reflective foil, unless it's one large intact sheet, how did it bury itself, and who buried it, and how did it remain intact after all these years? So it was wishful thinking. It was kind of because they build it up and they tear it down, and unfortunately that's how a lot of these shows are. They raise the suspense level and then they burst your bubble, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a pretty common theme. And another great question, because I was going to ask you this too, because there's been various descriptions of what the craft looked like. Some say that it was a sort of flying wing, not a saucer-shaped craft, and other people said that the craft was, you know, a typical aluminum, you know, metal flying saucer, round. And what is your take on that?
Which is, and Frank Kaufman, you know, getting back to, he was claiming that it was more of a bat wing.
Okay.
And he had, you know, those of us who were, you know, trying to establish, you know, his credibility. We were trying to pin it and tie it in with what Kenneth Arnold had described on June 24th, that they weren't saucer shaped, they were more crescent shaped, but that they maneuvered through the air like saucers skipping across the water. And that's where,
famously.
It was Bill Bechet, who was a reporter with the Oregonian newspaper, Bill Bechet, who then coined the very phrase flying saucer.
So and wasn't it flying disc was used before that?
Flying disc. Yeah, flying disc, exactly, Stephen. And even the William Rhodes photographs from July 7th show that heel-shaped object, 2 pictures over Phoenix, Arizona at that time. But the witnesses at the impact site, the debris field is debris, whether it was the outer.
It's all pieces, so you're not going to see what it. Yeah.
But the impact site where you had what appeared to be an escape pod, a capsule, egg-shaped, about the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. So it was hardly, you know, an intact ship. But just as we have had escape modules, and as far as cabin ejection devices that would propel, you know, pilot and crew, you know, away from a disaster, that type of thing. Maybe that's where we learned, you know, that functionality.
That's great technology to figure out for space flight too, right? Sometimes you gotta escape. And another question, and I'm sure that the answer is yes, but you can speak to this. Paul Cargo asks, had the base been buzzed by UFOs prior to the crash?
We often ask that question. Were they aware? And what we discovered that it wasn't at Roswell, but where there were a growing number of sightings and reports was at the White Sands Proving Grounds, just a couple hours to the west of Roswell. And you had all of the captured German V-2 rockets being tested there. It obviously, just to the north, is where Trinity, the first atomic bomb detonation, took place just 2 years before. and you had the most sophisticated radar system in the world at that time.
Yeah, they wanted to protect that nuclear base, well, atomic base at the time. Yeah.
But this, I'm talking about White Sands.
Oh, White Sands, sure, yeah.
White Sands, because of the rocket launching. Now, radar was in its infancy at that time. And as a result, all other bases only track incoming aircraft. Whereas White Sands at that time was the first base in the world that was tracking in and departing aircraft. So it might have been a reason that they were then picking up more anomalies. And then hence there were a number of newspaper reports at that time of objects that were witnessed and tracked over White Sands. Nothing around Roswell, except you had the Dan Wilmot sighting the afternoon of July 2nd. And he and his wife on the west side of Roswell saw an object that was moving beyond Roswell and towards the northwest, towards Lincoln County, which then would become, the site of where this object explodes and then rains debris down that very evening.
Interesting. Well, I'm about done with I could keep you here for another 5 hours, but I won't do that. I want to thank you so much for doing this. When you weren't really, I know you're a very busy guy. So for those that don't know, Mr. Schmidt is so busy that it took him a while to get back to me. And I kept going. Every day I would check my email going, please, Mr. Schmidt, get back to me because you've got to be in this series. We can't end it without Mr. Schmidt's participation and involvement. And it's not just me. All the viewers kept asking me, you're going to have Don Schmitt, right? So
thank you for your persistence.
I wanted to tell everybody too. It's very easy to find Mr. Schmidt's books on Amazon. You just type in Don Schmitt, and all of his books pop up. And I don't know, Mr. Randall's written a ton. How many books have you written on just Roswell? Can you go through quickly?
UFO crash at Roswell, Truth About UFO Crash at Roswell, Witness to Roswell, the journal, and then I did UFO Crash at Roswell 2, which was the chronological pictorial. We did the first edition of Witness to Roswell. Then we did the revised edition of Witness to Roswell. We did the Children of Roswell, as you mentioned. We now have done Roswell, the ultimate cold case file, Roswell Dig Diaries. So
when you type in Don Schmitt into Amazon, you get just a treasure trove of, and I have been. There's just a few left that I haven't read of yours, so I'm gonna work on those because.
And I think you could verify, Stephen, that in each book we cover a whole new aspect.
Yeah. Every time I think like, well, you got another book, and then you get the book, and it's like a different sort of approach. Like Witness to Roswell is firsthand witnesses. Children of Roswell is secondhand or children of people, families, people that were involved. And I know you wrote the book with Kevin Randall. That was first, right?
Which was made into the Roswell movie.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's one of my favorite movies. I think at the end they want to
watch it. You gotta watch for Kevin's cameo.
I've seen it. I've seen both of yours. You're in it too. You're in the movie. You're like a bartender, right?
I'm a bartender in a scene with Kyle MacLachlan, Xander Berkeley, Martin Sheen, and Kim Grice. Yes,
that is awesome. Well, I want to encourage my audience. If you want to learn more about this event, I can think of no better place to start than Mr. Schmidt's books. It's been an honor and privilege to have you here. I can't tell you how happy I am that you could do this.
Thank you, Steve. And I promise next time you ask, I will.
No, it's quite all right. It's quite all right. I know you're a busy guy, so I was just hopeful. Like we got to get Mr. Schmitt to finish. I'm hoping that. We might get a few more. We might get a few more people, but the next things are really like more out there and not very. I don't want to say credible, but just because I want to include all perspectives and let everybody make up their own mind. And maybe when we're finished with the series, we'll do a panel and see if we can have everybody come back. And but you guys have to promise not to try to murder Cal Core if you come on.
No. If I
That's
could
going to be
survive,
contentious. Yeah.
if I could survive doing the debate at PsyCop,
Yeah, I think you'll be okay. I think him and Mr. Randall have a long-standing beef going, though,
they
so
do.
that's going to
They
be a
do.
big
They do.
back and forth. You know, I guess it's competitive doing this Roswell book stuff, and everybody wants to be right. And,
It's
you know,
if I had to waste my time, and I think a lot of it becomes a distraction. And it would be no different than I probably have over 200 letters that I received from Phil Class through the years. And you know how many I actually responded to, Stephen? 2. Whereas Kevin responded to every one. And it's like every time you're taking the time to do that, it takes away from the investigation. And that's why I don't have the time, and I won't waste my time in dealing with.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. It's a distraction.
It doesn't progress anything, good or bad. But let's end it on this note. And I've said this before.
Oh yeah, wait a minute. Actually, yeah, I'm so glad that I'm going to solo you, and I would like for you in 5 minutes or less, if you can, because I've heard you do this riff before that I think is one of the things that convinced me about this, and you know who flew the I've heard you do this, so I'm going to solo you, and I would really like it if you can wrap up your appearance here by giving us 5 minutes or so of your very best evidence and why you believe the alien hypothesis.
You know, this again coming from the perspective of having been a total skeptic and allowing the evidence to take us to whatever the final resolution would happen to be regarding the case. And to listen to first-hand witnesses describe one after the other, whether military or civilian, handling material that defies conventional explanation. And I don't care what the alternative explanation, they never deal with those accounts. Whether you're talking about, something top secret or a balloon, and how ridiculous, a balloon not demonstrating anything that would resemble what the eyewitnesses have described. And then you have all the outside personnel that come in. Like one of the nurses who was at the base hospital told us at that time, because they were told to stay away. They were told not to report back to the hospital for their normal duties at that time. And she said to us, clearly something big had happened. Well, a recovery of a weather balloon, again, is as mundane as it raining during the monsoons at that time of year. They wouldn't have, shut down the base. They wouldn't have directed as far as MPs shoot to kill anybody as far as crossing a particular, as far as perimeter. They wouldn't have had the transporting of wreckage that went for testing and analysis at different facilities around the country. They wouldn't have called up the funeral home asking as far as what should be done as far as the preservation of bodily tissue and fluids regarding something that we can't document, an accident at that time involving anyone, any bodies that would have necessitated such inquiries at that time. And so either you have the military and the civilians involved all reading from the same script, because they all experience this from their different vantage points, their different backgrounds, but yet they reacted the same way. I don't care if it's the ranchers and their hired hands, their wives, their children, or all the way up to the base commander at Roswell, who would have been the second pilot dropping the atomic bomb on Japan. And the reason that he wasn't sent on that mission was because they had higher hopes, higher plans for him. They kept him stateside because he was their golden boy at that time. This was no knee-jerk reaction when they put that press release out on July 8th, where they announced to the world that they had a flying saucer. Knee-jerk reaction. Washington already had the material in hand already Sunday, July 6th. They had all day on Monday the 7th and till that next morning to put together this whole, as far as cover-up scheme, and it worked. They got away with it. And then they shut down Roswell. All the violations of the First Amendment rights. They threatened them with the loss of the licenses if they should ever talk about this again. And then they start abducting civilians. I mean, please explain to me why in God's name, if the rancher, Mac Brazel, has merely misreported, misidentified a weather balloon device, why would they violate his civil rights by kidnapping him and holding him out at the base for 5 full days? And then until he recants his story, until he is then ushered to the newspapers, to the radio stations, to retract the original flying saucer story. And then and only then, after they have his assurance that he'll never say a word about the truth of the matter, they release him. And he's a broken man. He's never the same. We've talked to his hired hands. We've talked to his family, and they all said how he was a broken rancher. He was never the same after all this. You put this all together, and then up into the later stages of their lives, and where they're not, and then only giving deathbed testimonies. They're finally conceding. They're finally breaking down, and they're telling their wives, their children, it wasn't a balloon. It wasn't from here. They weren't from here. They weren't human. It wasn't made on this earth, as Major Jesse Marcel said, the #1 intelligence officer in the United States military at that time. And he makes that statement that it was nothing made on this earth. Now, I grant you this. The onus remains on us. The burden of proof is still with us. But at least our investigation has remained fluid after all this time. We are still racing with the undertaker, now with the families. We are still searching the sites. We are still looking for the physical evidence. We're still hoping that there's a footlocker or something hidden as far as in a basement or in a crawl space yet to be discovered and presented to finally prove this. But we're still the ones who are proactive. We're the ones that are still not so rigid in our position as putting out a final statement and this is the end of it and take it or leave it because I say so. Well, in our cases, it's because all of our witnesses say so, because you have 0 witnesses. Please, you have none, and you know it. You have absolutely 0 witnesses. And so how do you think that would decide in a court of law? Well, I have nobody to call up to the stand. I have nobody to present any information or any documentation or any testimony to the contrary. But believe me, sorry, judge is going to laugh you out of the room because your opinion is nothing more than an opinion, and they come a dime a dozen. It comes down to this. If we're wrong about this entire Roswell incident, life goes on. The world goes on. It changes nothing. But if you're wrong, if you have been misleading the public for now over 70 years about what we consider to be the biggest story of the millennium, it changes everything. And that is your greatest fear, that it will change everything. And you were leading the charge to make sure it never came out. That burden, that guilt remains with you, not us, because we've done all we can, and we will continue to do all we can to demonstrate what really happened. It's an old movie, and I'll end with this, called The Rashomon Effect. It's a Japanese murder trial in 1950. The Rashomon effect is demonstrated in the courtroom, is that there are 3 sides to every event. 3 sides. There's your opinion, your position. There's my opinion, my position. And then number 3, there's what really happened. Who has performed the greatest due diligence in establishing what happened? Those who just say it didn't happen because I say it didn't happen, or those who are still making every effort to prove and demonstrate what happened, no matter what happened, whatever happened. And there too, I think history will judge us much kinder than it will those who just flatly and summarily dismissed what, again, potentially is the greatest story in the last 1,000 years.
Okay, well spoken. I like that.
Longer than 5 minutes, but
no, that's quite all right. I wanted to give each. I missed in my notes to do this for each guest, and I'm gonna see if I can't get them to do the. I missed it with Mr. Randall and Mr. Korf as well, probably. But we'll probably. I'm hopeful that we could do some sort of panel show, because I think that would be amazing and be well attended, and I hope that you will participate in that if we can get everybody's schedules to jive.
Count me in.
Absolutely, and I want to thank you once again. It's rare that we get a guest of your caliber and status, and it's been a pleasure. So I'm going to throw you out of here. There's nothing you need to do except close out your browser, and you'll be good to go. Otherwise, you'll stay in my backstage. We're going to do an intermission, and then I'm going to have like a discussion with the audience for the next hour or so.
Well, have fun with that. But
okay,
I need to.
All right,
my wife for the evening. So it is
all right. Thanks, Mr. Schmidt. You have a good evening. All right, bye. My pleasure. Wow, what a great evening this has been, friends. So this is what I'm saying. It's just been like ping pong, back and forth. And, we hear from the skeptical side, and then we hear from more of the believer side. And I can't say I disagree with Mr. Schmidt, when he talks about the volume of work that he has done. I mean, the guy has flown all over the country at his own expense, driven all over the country at his own expense, just trying to get to the witnesses, trying to get to what it is that actually happened here, what it is that actually happened, not here, but in Roswell in 1947. It's been an enduring mystery for years, and it's just one of those great mysteries. I'm hopeful that someday a smoking gun is going to come and prove definitively exactly what happened. And it will be such an amazing thing if that happens, and also sort of end the debate, because I think eventually some evidence is going to surface that will be beyond debate. At least I'm hopeful about that. So friends, we're going to take a short intermission here, and then we're going to return, and we will continue in a discussion about these events. So friends, I will literally be back in just a few minutes, but I got to go check on something here in the home front real quickly, and get a caffeinated beverage, because it's been a long day for me. And then I want to give some time for the live chat to just have a discussion about Roswell or really anything else. So friends, we'll be right back. Stand by. Okay, friends, and we are back. Um, I wanted to, I don't want to keep Mr. Schmidt for another hour, uh, but I wanted to give some time for the live chat um, and see how everybody's feeling about both Roswell or anything else. Um, Boy, I keep going back and forth, you know? And when we finish this series, I'm going to have a lot of work to do because I decided that I'm going to go witness by witness through all the testimony in every book, and I've got most of them already. May have to get a few more. And, I think the back and forth issues with one author saying the witness said this, and then another author saying, not really, or he didn't say that, or he retracted that. All these things need to be put in one place so that we can try to get to the truth behind each of the witnesses. And until somebody does that, this ping pong game of back and forth, they said this, no, they didn't, is going to continue. And I thought it would be helpful if we go through each witness or each significant witness, and even the secondhand witnesses, the children of the people that were there. Yeah, I think it would be important. It's important work that needs to be done. I don't see anybody else doing it, at least not lately. Back in the blog days, people would write blogs on Roswell and go back and forth with the witness first said this, then they said this later. Spooky's asking next guest. I have a few surprises. I'm going to leave it at that. But we are going to get a few, probably two more people that are going to speak about their beliefs about Roswell and what it is that happened. And I want to include all, even some more esoteric, I don't want to say less credible, but, there are some other theories out there, including, there is an account of a nurse who telepathically communicated with a live alien. I'm trying to get that author and a few others because I think it's important if we're going to do this series to include everyone's testimony, everyone's research or belief of events surrounding Roswell, and put it all in one place, right? Stream shared. Thank you very much. Smash that like button. I didn't do. I'm going to check in real quickly with our. 1 second, friends. I'm going to check in real quickly with both our Patreon and our PayPal. I'm going to check in with. For those that are unaware, we have Patreon. Just search my name, Stephen Cambion, on Patreon. You'll be sure to find us, or go to the About section of our channel here, and you too can help me produce more shows just like this. Every dollar that goes into the Patreon goes back into the show. I'm happy to say that I had a green screen, but I did not have adequate lighting for the green screen to work right. So I used some of the Patreon money, got better lighting, and now the green screen is, I'd say it's working, but it's not working 100%. It's working like 95% or 98%. There's still a little bit of weird res, so I think I need one more light, or I don't know. This green screen, I'm sorry, has been the bane of my existence for about a week now because I'm a little OCD, and I can't stand it when I see a show that uses a green screen but the person is like rezzed out, or there's like, it just looks terrible to me. So I'm not going to use that green screen until I've got it as close to broadcast quality as I could possibly get it. That might need a few more lights. All of these things are purchased from either our PayPal donations, that again is in the About section, or in every first of the month, I get the $100 from Patreon or whatever it is right now. So there's two ways that you can help us. The first, of course, costs nothing, and that is to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Hit the notification bell. Make sure that you are notified of future shows when we go live. Costs nothing to share these videos on your social media, to tweet them, to share them on Facebook. And I always tell people this: uh, please do like, comment, and subscribe, but also send our channel address to some friends. If you enjoy this, chances are you have some friends that will probably enjoy the content that we produce here too. So you'd be doing us both a favor by copying our channel address and sending it to some of your friends. They'll enjoy the content and we'll get to grow our audience. So it's a win-win for everybody. And liking, commenting, sharing our channel costs nothing. If you are feeling generous and want to help us support us to produce more quality content like this, then we would appreciate your financial support to continue the show. You could do a PayPal donation or by becoming a Patreon supporter. And I check in every show with both the PayPal and the Patreon. And if you add a note, if you make a PayPal donation, if you add a note, we shout out and thank you live on air. If you make a donation while we're not live, then we shout it out on the very next show. So I want to thank our latest PayPal contributor is Jill D. Thank you so much, Jill D, for a kind and generous donation of $20. And Jill writes, "This is Jill D. More puppets and parody videos fund." Yeah, thank you, Jill D. I really appreciate your generosity, your support of our show, you being here in the live chat and supporting our show, especially with a couple of bucks, 20 of them. That's quite a generous donation. Thank you very much. And yeah, I'm going to buy some more puppet supplies because we're going to expand this comic disclosure series. I've already got 2 new puppets ready that are going to be added to the clowns and the rabbit. We're going to expand the production here. So thank you very much, Jill D. We do appreciate your generosity and your support of the show. I'm going to check in with patreon.com and see if we have any new Patreon patrons, any new Patreon supporters to shout out and thank. And it looks like, well, we've had a few delete their donations, and I understand it's a very difficult time right now. So, hey, if you got to delete your pledge, I get it. It's a difficult time for everyone right now, which is why I'm begging on the internet. But we haven't had any new Patreon supporters recently. So please do. The Patreon is $1 a month or more. You can set your own monthly donation amount. Every dollar is really appreciated. So back to the live chat. Pragmagic says green screen problems are real. I'm not sure, but I think you may be one of those people that's all rezzed out sometimes, like it kind of works, right? And no offense, it's just that I'm so OCD that I couldn't do a show like that. It would bother the hell out of me. Or maybe it's somebody else. I don't think it's you, Pragmagic, but I've seen a couple of shows. I'm sure, and I don't watch a show, but who is it? Unidork is like, it's like he doesn't even try to make the green screen work. It's just all fuzzy and shitty and weird, right? I don't like that. And also, I'd really like to do animated backgrounds, and StreamYard doesn't do that. So I'm going to beg Spooky, who knows a lot more about OBS. I'm going to beg Spooky to help me figure out how to get OBS to be a virtual camera and run the green screen, but let me use an animated background. And by the way, I'm fine. I didn't know this, but you really have to buy a good animated background. I'm sure there's some free ones that look okay, but the really good pro-looking ones, they're $30 or $50. I'm fine. We can buy the good animated background if I could get animated backgrounds to work. The static animated background looks fine, and that's just a graphic behind you that doesn't move. I mean, that looks fine, but other shows have the animated one. So if I'm going to deal with a green screen and getting that green screen working, I want to be able to use the animated. And Flip asks, I'll look into Patreon. Do you take crypto donations? I don't have a crypto wallet currently, and not a real big crypto fan. Back in the day, I mined early before anybody knew what crypto was. I was into crypto mining, but as soon as it became near impossible to mine because of the thing with crypto mining is like, oh great, I got $100 worth of Bitcoin this month, but my electric bill was $185. You know, it just wasn't a gain for me, so I stopped trying. And there reached a point very quickly where that happened. It was for a while I could make $150 or $200 a month with the mining rig that I had, but eventually the electric bill and so not really a big fan of crypto, but we're a big fan of PayPal and all that other stuff. Yeah, I'm silly not to be holding Bitcoin. I like real estate, Spooky, for an investment. And so I'm hoping that maybe sometime this year, we're going to find another piece of land, because land never goes down in value. It only goes up. I don't know about crypto. And also, Spooky, you were on that stream with Alien Scientists. I got bad news for you. As soon as quantum computers become mainstream in the next, I'd say 10 years, that blockchain's going away, bro. It's not a good quantum computer could destroy cryptocurrency in a day. So I'm not real big on it, but to each their own. Oh, thanks, Flip. I appreciate that. Says, no worries. I'll look into your Patreon. I don't have a PayPal either, but would love to support your content. Great. I appreciate it. William Pixley says, just tuning in, listening from the start. Hope everyone is well. Yeah, everything is good here, William Pixley. Bitcoin too high to get in on. Dodge all the way. Well, now people are able to buy portions of coins. Like you could buy 1/100th of a Bitcoin now with the exchanges that they have, Dan. But I agree with you. Okay. Yeah, I didn't really want to get too far into that. I think that he just considers, I think that Mr. Schmidt just considers CalCorp a debunker that doesn't do the work, like you heard what he was saying. Like you didn't interview the witnesses. I did. You didn't fly out to them. I did. And I guess that's a valid criticism. And somebody else asks, how sure are you that CalCorp is inside of some kind of Philip class debunker? Seems like he discredits absolutely everyone, which sure seems suspect. Sending you a PayPal here soon. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll continue to monitor that. If you do send it while we're still on air and I don't notice it, let me know and I will shout you out. And thank you profusely. You have a phone on. If you want the beef on Cal, you need to talk to Bidney. David Bidney. Okay. Listen, I get it. Mr. Korf, you could Google and you'll see that there are whole websites dedicated to trashing CalCorp. And most of that, or a lot of that at least, is run by Billy Meyer sex cult members who did not like that he went undercover in the Billy Meyer sex cult and busted them for being total frauds. And he's made a lot of other enemies throughout his career, sort of bursting people's balloons, right? And you saw how contentious things are between him and Mr. Kevin Randall. If we do have this panel show, I have a feeling that the greatest challenge is going to be to just try to keep those two from yelling and screaming at each other or getting hot and heated. I'm hoping that everybody will be able to keep things civil. And if not, I got a mute button for each guest. I'm just going to mute people. Used to host Paracast. Yeah, the name sounds familiar to me, UFO Naut. I'll look into it. I will definitely look into it. Philip Blair says, I just hopped over from Walter Bosley's stream, Truthseekers. He just finished his weekly stream. I got to start trying to find people's schedules if they have scheduled streams so I don't step over people like Bosley or others. I mean, we do our best here, but sometimes it goes by when the guest can do it. And I just got to do it whenever the guest can do it. So, like I think I try to avoid Thursday nights because of the Paranormal Hood guys. But once in a while, guests can only do it on Thursday, or, it is what it is. And also just time and whatever. Sometimes I just got to do what I got to do. And I don't mean to step over other people. And also, sometimes that gets weird. Like, I can't remember, but there was some show host that was like, hey, you shouldn't stream when I'm streaming. And I went, well, yeah, okay, but, I don't have a set schedule. I wish that I could, but just things are very busy and weird here. But for those who don't know, I'm simultaneously developing computer products and doing this show. And the computer products are still being developed, so there's no money there yet. It's like in startup mode, no income. But I'm very busy with that stuff, and I keep telling myself at least that I really have to spend more time with the computer end of things that I'm working on, because I think it's important, and there's some other things that I've been doing lately that are taking time away from the show. And also I realized that ideally this show should at the very least be a self-supporting hobby and not, I'm not really intending to make this a full-time job, but if it turned into that, I'd be very happy doing this every day. But in the meantime, I've got to do, Spooky says his hardware stuff is real neat. Yeah, we're going to have a credit card sized motherboard in our computer that we'll be selling, that it will come with my own version of Linux called Altos, the alternative operating system, or a Linux terminal on steroids. But boy, that's been taking a lot of time. I have one of those boards with Altos up and running. I just got to figure out a case, and as soon as I figure out a case, we go to production, and I think we're going to be making those by the 100. In other words, I'm going to make 100 computers in a batch, order all the parts, put them all together, and then hopefully sell them. And that is going to be a very low cost entry point. I don't know, retail will be $500 or under. Probably a lot under that. I think it was Nolan Bushnell from Atari who said it's going to be a computer for the classes or masses, not the classes. Not everybody has $3,000 to buy an iMac to make videos on, but if they could get an inexpensive computer that was pretty capable and had a really good operating system, I think that would be good. Spooky says, 3D print the case, man. I've been saying, Spooky, that's all well and good. But have you ever made 3D printed things? Because I have. And you know what ends up happening? 3D printing sounds great. It really does. It's like if you need a custom anything made, you design it in CAD and then you create it with the 3D printer. First problem, it would take, I don't know, depending on the printer, 1 to 24 hours to print the case for this thing. That's the first problem. So you'd have 3D printers going 24/7 to try to make 100 cases. The second problem is, a lot of people don't know this, but when you get a 3D printed thing, it's not done. You're going to have to sand it, body putty it, paint it. So I'm actually looking into a simpler method. It's either going to be an aluminum or a wooden case that's painted and laminated. One or the other, one way or the other, I'll get that case done and be able to make these computers. I just have to be able to make them by the 100 to start. If things progress and orders are more than I can handle making these things by the 100, then we'll look into more manufacturing options. But because I'm using off-the-shelf components, we should be able to just get somebody to make us an aluminum case if we get to the point where I have to sell these computers by the thousand from, that's entirely possible. I hope that it happens. I'll meet the challenges of making those computers by the thousand when the time comes. But for right now, I think making them 100 or even 10 at a time while the orders start coming in, we'll see what demand there is. But I do have some good news in the form of someone that used to work exclusively selling computers to the educational market. And he and I had a few meetings, and, things are looking good for making the computer that we're going to produce and manufacture into some sort of, computer for the educational market. After all, it has GPIO pins. You can control motors and lights and stepper motors and servos with it. So it's great for like robotics or any kind of learning lab kind of stuff. It would be great for. Heavy Metal says, when all is said and done, I'm pretty sure there wasn't no aliens crashing anywhere. Fun though. Yeah, I'm still leaving all options open. Jolly Bridgeburner says, sounds interesting. No, I don't have a website yet I took my company website down when COVID happened, and my whole company, which used to be centered around in-person, in-home service. In other words, if you need your laptop or your desktop computer fixed, you don't take it somewhere. You just call me and I would come to your home and fix it. But the problem is nobody wants you in their home now. So my business went from pretty busy to absolutely nothing, literally overnight. And it's a shame. I'm hopeful, I'm hopeful that things will, people keep saying get back to normal. Is heat an issue? No, and the computer's going to be fanless. It just needs heat sinks. Does your OS get very warm in a case? You mean the computer, maybe, because the OS doesn't get warm or cold. But okay, yeah, I see what you mean. No, heat's not going to be an issue with those. Yes, the amount of money that can be made if everyone had a 3D printer. Yes, I completely agree with you, Eric. 3D printing is great for prototyping and one-offs, but not so great for production runs. Yeah. Yeah, it's spooky. But, what I'm really thinking is, first of all, I thought that I don't want to make a computer with a wood case, because that seemed to me to be like a wood case. That's kind of old school, and like, even if it's painted well or laminated over the wood, it's still going to look, ideally I would like an aluminum case, but the price of aluminum and the fact that I have zero metalworking skills, but I'm very good with wood. Like, I could build furniture, or I could build, pretty much I could build anything out of wood. It's very easy material to work with, and I have woodworking tools and drills and saws and, a chop saw, a table saw, drill presses. So I'm leaning towards wood, but I got to find a way to sort of hide the fact that it's wood, right? And that's why I was thinking lamination may be a good idea. I'm still, I got all these different things. I'm not going to pan the camera around because it looks like a mad scientist lab over there, but oh, and Spooky, you'll be happy to see. Look, there's the mic right there, but it's just out of frame, right? So Spooky was on me. Make sure the mic is right in your face, even if it's in frame. I don't like it in frame, but it's literally right here, like right here. Oh, you can see. There it is, right here. So yeah, best of both worlds, Spooky, because it's right in my face, but it's still out of the frame. So you're right. I just had to mess around with the stupid stand for it and get it right. So on the Roswell series, I'm hopeful that we're going to have a few more guests. If not, we'll wrap it up, and I hope that everybody will come back and do a panel show. I think that would be great. Brad Gray says, I don't believe Rendlesham, but still you never know. I don't like that Rendlesham has had additions. In other words, there was an original story, and then later here comes one of the participants talking about binary codes that just so happen to translate to English. And I'm a computer science guy. He's never produced the full binary codes. Shame you're not using that mic. Yeah, I am. Let me check again, just to make sure. Yeah, I definitely am using that mic. HDA Intel. That's the direct line in. This is the XLR mic, Spooky, and that's going into, see if I get closer, I am using this mic. It's going directly into the mic input on this iMac. So I'm definitely using it. You can get high quality ABS project boxes for less than $5. Paul Cargo, that may be a good idea, but again, I'm still looking into that. That's one of the options, actually. And you can get aluminum project boxes for just slightly more money. That's an option too. But I'd really like to go with an all-in-one case. In other words, like the computers that I grew up with, like a Commodore 64, where the keyboard is the computer, but thinner and smaller and a little more sleek and high-tech and updated. But the computer will be inside the keyboard. That's the major design that I'd like to do, which basically means that I have to get a case to fit around an off-the-shelf keyboard that I could buy in huge volumes. Like I said, there's tremendous challenges to getting this computer thing going. I'm hopeful that tap it. Here, I'm tapping it. Is that okay? Unless, yeah, if I was using the other mic, it would tell me when I go to audio settings or cam mic settings, Spooky. It didn't spike when you went closer. Oh, geez, man. People are never happy. Look, I'm using I'm using this microphone. It's right here, Spooky. That's the only microphone that's on right now. I'm not punking you. That's the microphone I'm using. Jeez. Isn't that called a laptop? Yeah, it's kind of like a laptop without a screen. You have to plug in an external screen. Maybe that would be. Didn't hear a tap. I have this. It's got a big fluffy thing on top of it. Here, I'll take it off. Here. Is it tapping now? Like, why do I have to prove this stuff? You're crazy, Spooky. Yeah. So I don't know, for everybody that, once in a while somebody will leave some comment like get a better microphone, or like I'm using an industry standard XLR microphone, which, by the way, this microphone was tested against really, really expensive microphones. And I saw, the reason I bought this microphone is because I saw 3 studio audio engineers test this mic against very, very expensive mics, and they were all very impressed with it. And it's relatively inexpensive. So we end up with this. Brad Gray says, I don't have any audio problems here. That's good to know. Wow, I'm drinking pink lemonade, and it tastes a lot different with no vodka in it, I gotta say. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, Spooky. Fly over here and verify I'm using the right microphone that I say I'm using. I don't know that I could screenshot and show you. I don't know how I'm supposed to prove it to you. Right? Or no, I can. Watch. I can. All right. All right. This is the other microphone that I was using before that you complained about and said was too tinny. That would be the other microphone, the USB one. And that's way over there. So, yeah. And we'll go back to the microphone right in front of me. There. Do you hear the difference? Maybe not. I don't know. I don't really want to talk. See, even if I am using whatever I'm using, people are still going to complain. It doesn't matter, right? I'm going to get emails, Spooky, that this microphone is too bottomy and bassy and doesn't sound right, that I should get a different microphone. And then I'll get a different microphone and somebody else will complain. You know, and I'm kind of over that stuff. If I'm using an industry standard broadcast microphone, XLR straight into the computer, that's as good as it's getting. I mean, yeah, I guess I could just keep buying microphones forever, but I don't want to do that. Bugability. Yeah, I agree with this statement. The renders from binary code was suspect because it was translated to ASCII, but still an interesting one. Audio seems fine. Thank you. The funny thing is, I think Spooky is right, but I just like seeing Steven rant at her. It's just, listen, I was talking about this on a previous show. Oh, and by the way, I did something I never do, but I booted somebody from the live chat earlier. And that person is simply not welcome here until they apologize for making slanderous, nasty statements about my guests and me and my show publicly on Twitter. You're not going to act like a total J.O., right? I've gotten through an entire show almost without cursing. I'm going to try to continue that. I'm not going to have some guy who was completely and totally belligerent, nasty, argumentative, personally insulting, ad hominem attacking, slandering my guests all over Twitter, come into my live chat and then start asking nasty questions or saying that I'm softballing him and not asking him hard questions. What hard questions was I supposed to ask him? The big issue was this Kaufman witness, and I asked him about it, and I think Mr. Schmidt addressed that just as well as Tom Carey addressed it, right? So for me, what hard questions do you want me to ask him? You know, and it's always some armchair idiot that doesn't have a show that's going to tell me that I'm doing things wrong on my show. I'm sorry. Goodbye. So I booted him from the live chat because he was getting nasty, argumentative, and being really nasty in the live chat. See ya. You're not welcome here. You don't like my show. You don't like me. My guests are. He says this. J.O. says that my guests are known. This is the quote from him: known paid government disinformation agents. Then he comes in the live chat and says, well, I'll listen with an open mind, but yeah, and he's going to start slandering guests again. There's no proof. There's no evidence of any of his statements. I asked him for pay stubs. I asked him for proof 10 times. He won't give it to me. Bye-bye. You're booted. I'm not dealing with people like that. I don't have to, right? Art Levine is here, or Art L. Says believers should read course book on Roswell. Yeah, I'm going to read it again along with Alien Scientist, and then we're going to talk to Mr. Korf again, right? Eric Anderson says there seems to be a lot of UFO lore that overlaps with government experiments with psychedelics. Rendlesham fits that bill for sure. Hard to tell if it's disinfo, distraction, or something else. Yeah, there's been a lot of government experiments into psychedelics. My favorite is Operation Midnight Climax, wherein the CIA hired prostitutes to lure men back to a brothel and dose them with very high doses of LSD just to see what would happen. It's great that our government has done projects like that. Brad Gray, which show are we talking about here? I think we're talking about this one. At least I thought. Sounds like something an agent would say. Yep. Definitely. And Dane Brooke in the Twitch chat. Thank you for being there in the Twitch chat. I'm sorry if you're the only one. Georgia St. Pierre, former legend, UFC champion, is a huge believer in aliens. In fact, he claims to have been abducted. Have not heard that, but I've seen him fight. Good fighter. No, I meant the guy. Oh, okay, you meant the guy being a P. Yeah. Well, it was early in the show, and you know what? I saw 3 or 4 nasty comments directed at me or the guest, and Brad Gray. I just said, "See you later." I'm not going to sit through 2 hours of you in the live chat saying nasty stuff about a guest. If you don't like the guest, don't come into my live chat. See you, and that's it. And that's kind of how I am. Art Levine says, "What are the Art L7 says, what are the icons, wrench icons in chat?" That means those are moderators, or they have moderator power. We give those out quite a lot. I can give one to you if you so desire, and that just helps us run the live chat. Even though nobody booted the idiot earlier, that they probably should. But actually, no, I don't want people booting anybody. So it's best if anybody boots somebody, it's me, because that's the first time that I've ever booted somebody from our show or a live chat. I just feel like if you're going to say nasty, completely, totally nasty stuff to me and my guests, then you're not welcome. Go to somebody else's stream and spout your hatred and nonsense. It's very simple. It's very simple. And anybody that knows me knows you can ask me questions. I'll engage with people. I'll answer questions. But as soon as you get to the point where you're slandering people with no evidence and no proof, and you won't provide any proof, and you keep it up, see ya. I'm kind of to the point right now where I don't have time for idiots. I don't have time to argue with idiots. I don't have time to defend my guests against idiots. If he had come to me with some valid, reasonable questions or accusations with proof or evidence, but he didn't. It's just nonsense. He's spewing nonsense on my Twitter. Oh, I blocked him on Twitter too. So if you're just going to spout nonsense and nastiness, see you later. I will delete you from my online existence. Yeah, that's pretty much where we're at. Brad Gray, you came in late, must have missed that. I didn't let him go very far. Brad Gray, he said 3 or 4 statements like stop softballing him, start asking him hard questions. I'm like, who is this guy think he is? He's going to tell me how to do my job here? And I keep on saying this, and I really mean it. To all these people that think I do such a terrible job, yet they watch every show I do and tell me what a terrible job I do, there's a lot of those people. Go, please. Go start your own show. Go do your own show. And I can't wait to see how much better it is than mine. I can't wait to see how much better guests you get. I've had people tell me that. You should get better guests. We just had a guy that wrote 7 books on Roswell. And we're talking about Roswell. Where is a better guest than a guy who's written 7 books about the event that we're discussing that night, right? He's been studying this event for 35 years. I think that's a good guest. If you don't, then you're stupid. And that's where I'm at with everything. And by the way, I just think I don't have the time for negative, nasty people. And I'm no longer going. I used to tolerate them because I thought, I don't want to be one of those guys that just blocks everybody that disagrees with him on social media. And hey, I think I'm clear in my conscience that I don't do that. A lot of people disagree with me civilly, and I'm fine with that. Totally okay with that. You want to disagree with me all you want, but do it in a civil way, right? Don't be nasty and argumentative or slanderous, spreading untrue, unproven rumors about my show, my guests. It just rubbed me the wrong way. RL7, I interviewed Frank Kaufman and would be glad to tell you about my impressions of, did any of these people interview other people interviewing him directly? Yeah, Don Schmitt and Kevin Randall were well known for interviewing Mr. Kaufman, and they kind of ran with the story and had a book where he was heavily featured. Later they said he's not credible. He made a lot of the stuff up that he told us, and they backed away from him as a credible guest. And yes, if they have a wrench, then they are a moderator. And many people you'll see in the live chat is an approved moderator. Oh, see, thanks for the support. No better guest than Don Schmitt. Not on Roswell, there isn't. But this J.O. thinks I should get better guests. I can't, like I said, start his own. He should start his own show. It'll be so much better than mine. I can't wait, right? I can't wait. This kind of stuff reminds me of rock band stuff. Like I used to have people come up to me after rock shows and tell me like that they had better guitar than me or something, like snobbily, you know, like, oh, you're playing a Jackson. I have, you know, a Gibson Custom. Well, good for you. Are you in a band? Well, no, but I have a Gibson Custom. Okay, I'm sorry I don't have a $3,000 guitar to play a show for $50 with my band, you know? It was always the guys that weren't doing anything that would tell me everything that I was doing wrong. Oh, here we go. Calcorf is chiming in. Oh, we triggered Calcorf. Oh, no. Randall refused to bother getting Kaufman's military file, and Art Levine got them in hours with one phone call. Well, good. Yeah, and we can talk to Mr. Levine about that and sort of cover, you know. But I don't think there's anything wrong, Calcorf, with trusting a guest while everything looks good about that guest. After all, they verified his, I thought Mr. Schmidt said they verified he was in Roswell at the time and this and that, and they had other indicators that he was telling the truth. Yeah, I know you're not tripping. I'm just teasing you, Mr. Korf. Yeah, me too. Spooky says, really great show tonight. Can't wait for the panel mud wrestle. And Mr. Korf, I asked Mr. Schmidt. He said he would come back for a panel. I'm pretty sure Mr. Carey will. So we're really, and I'm hopeful that Walter Bosley, an alien scientist, will as well. I'm hoping that you and Mr. Randall could both be on the panel and be civil towards each other. Oh, that's interesting. Levine called and exposed Kaufman as a lying old coot. Yeah, I think that has been established that he was a lying old coot that wanted to include himself in the event. Well done pulling all these characters together. Yeah. I still can't believe this worked out. I can't, like, I was real nervous earlier today because I thought Mr. Schmidt might no-show or something. He waited until like 8:59 to get to the backstage area. And I, you know, well, it's part of that's my fault. I sent him the invite late, but I was like, I got to get Don Schmitt. I got to get this interview done. And then we'll have, you know, this might, I'm going to talk to you off air, Daniel, but this might get recut into something like a documentary when we're done with the whole series. They did not investigate Kaufman as they should have. Good. I think that'll be great. And Calcorf's okay with the panel. He says he's in. So we've got 2 of the 5, I would suppose. I'll reach out to the rest of them, but Mr. Korf, you know, I have a bit more esoteric. I don't want to say I don't know the term for it. There's a few more people that I'd like to include in this Roswell series, but their evidentiary support is pretty light, right? But I still think I want to include them because then we can get some additional perspectives as to what exactly may have crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. And you'll be happy to know, Mr. Korf, I did remember, I almost forgot, but I remembered to get Mr. Schmidt to give us his best evidence right there at the end. Yeah, Ray Carr, I agree with you. Take some clips of your shows to make into YouTube shorts to boost your views. Check out the Spiffing Brit for details. Yeah, on my list of things to do is clip of the day. I want to, if I could find the time, you know, it'll take an hour to make a clip, to download a show, to go to the timestamp, to cut out the rest of it, to put in some kind of bumpers. But I know I really have to do that because a lot of people aren't going to give this channel a chance if they have to sit there and listen for 3 hours. But if it's a 5-minute video, they're probably much more likely to. So I will. Calcorf says, I have never ducked anyone on Roswell. I didn't say that you did. Well, Randall was still endorsing Kaufman until he died. Then Randall went for damage control. Maybe. Yeah, I wish I could get a hold of that ABC TV. Maybe I can contact ABC and try to find a copy of that, Calcorf. I would love to see that. Yeah, everyone should bring their best evidence. Spooky says, "Hi, yes, I do videos. Pay me in tacos. I could afford one Taco Bell taco per clip, right? That's about $1 US. If you can work with that." Yeah, I need somebody like Spooky that'll work for slave wages, right? Eric Anderson says the Roswell story lore always struck me as classic uncover up with many layers, from the mogul balloon story through to the most extreme EBE saucer takes. Seems almost like there's too much to sort. Yeah, that's what I've said. That's why Roswell for me is one of those enduring mysteries that I just keep going back to year after year. You know, every once in a, for a while, I read all the books and I thought I knew everything, and then I stopped looking into it. I was just convinced it's extraterrestrials. It has to be. And then I remember finding Calcor's book and being extremely disappointed and let down that I missed a good part of the story. Let's leave it at that. You know, and then other books come out, new information comes back. So every once in a while, I go back to researching the event again, right? But I've thought I've been close or thought I knew what exactly happened a few times. But then you read a couple more books and you realize that you don't know as much as you thought you knew. And some of those witnesses that people are claiming are great witnesses turn out to be not so great witnesses. Spooky says, remember the alien opera is real. Yeah, I've yet to get that working. I have my laptop right here, Spooky. It just doesn't like Windows 10, that software you guys were using. I have to try that out. CV Lindo Parado says the huge gash in the dirt at the site is definitely good evidence. A weather balloon isn't going to do that. Yeah, good point. See, this is what I was saying. And Mr. Corf, I was saying earlier that this whole series feels to me like a ping pong game. It's like, you know, these other guys say this witness said this, and then you come and show us, no, they didn't really say that, or that's taken out of context, or whatever. It's this big back and forth. Yes, Spooky, I know you're using it with Windows 10, but I can't stand Windows 10. I have it on my laptops. I don't have it on any desktop here because I hate it. So, and I really should probably, but I don't fix computers anymore. So, like, I haven't for a year, so I don't really need to be that familiar with Windows 10. I'm fine. Eric Anderson, you should be using Altos, not Windows. Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I am right at the moment. The stream is running. I suddenly realized, Mr. Anderson, that I have my own operating system that I can customize just for the show. So what I've done is, and I'm not going to show it now because the last time I tried to show this, something crashed, the stream crashed. I believe I fixed that issue, but I don't want to risk it. So what I have here, Mr. Anderson, is I have 12 desktops, and I have my notes for the show on one desktop. I have StreamYard in a full screen on another desktop. I have Twitter on another screen. I have the actual YouTube stream so that I can monitor the live chat. Everything is in its own full screen. So I have this huge amount of real estate, desktop real estate, with just really one screen. Eventually I might add another physical screen, but this is working great for me. And I've customized this whole rig just for running the show. I have my video editors, my audio editors, research materials, folders for each show, whatever I need. And the whole system is customized just for running the show. All my graphic editors for making thumbnails. It's really working out great. Calcorf agrees with me. Windows 10 sucks. Well, you're a Mac guy, so you think all Windows sucks. Windows 7 was pretty good. It's kind of like I like every other, I like is a strong word. I used and didn't mind using Windows XP. I used and didn't mind using Windows 98. It's like every other thing they make is terrible, though. So like Windows 98 second edition, pretty good. Windows ME, absolutely terrible, crash city, right? Windows 2000, much better. XP, really good, right? Then Vista, horrible. And then what was after that? 8, horrible. They had 2 horrible in a row, right? Or no, it was 7 and then 8. 8 was horrible. So yeah, it's like every other one, they screw it all up. And 10, they're not changing anytime soon. So good luck, man. Windows is not fun to use. Spooky. It really is. It really is. I promise you, it's XLR mic. It's an XLR mic. And there's an adapter in the back to go into the 1/8 inch. Calcorp said we had these problems when I was on the Boeing standards board. Steve Ballmer really screwed them. Okay. Yeah, and you know, one of the things that's always funny to me about Microsoft operating systems is that like you can still use XP. People say there's a security risk, or I don't know. I have 2 Windows XP machines downstairs that are fine. I'm running Firefox on them. Never had a security issue. But then again, I am an IT guy, so I know how to have a good firewall and a few other security issues, and I don't ever install unverified software. I don't download stuff from the internet and install it on my workstations. So I don't have any issues. I could still use XP forever, but they won't let you, like a lot of the modern browsers won't run on it and stuff now. Windows 11 will be intravenous. Yeah. The context. You're a Mac guy too, right? Haven't used Windows in 15 years, never looked back. I don't know, Daniel. I try to like Mac OS, but Linux ruined me. If I had never known anything about Linux and I tried Mac OS after being a Windows user, I would probably be okay with it. But the fact that it's just, to me, it's like Linux that you can't change anything. You can change your wallpaper. That's about it, right? I hate it. And the software, I'm a creative person. So I thought, yeah, I should really learn to use Final Cut and GarageBand and all these Logic and some other software that only works on Macs. I don't like any of it. I just don't like any of it. And I think really, at the end of the day, nobody cares what you use to produce a video, right? Except maybe for another video producer. Like I might ask you, Daniel, what software are you using for your editor? And you'll tell me, right? But it doesn't matter to the average viewer of that video if you use Final Cut or, Premiere or whatever you use. It doesn't really matter. So I think, it's Linux, but everything's locked down. You can't change nothing. So no, you can't change the window manager. You can't change the font. Well, I guess you could change the fonts, but that's about it. You can change the wallpaper and the fonts. That's about it. I don't want to change anything. Just don't want it to get viruses and break. Yeah, well, that's the only good thing I see about Mac. I've never had 15 years using Linux probably. I've never had a virus problem a Linux computer ever. Never once. But I've had a lot of Windows computers that I had to, constantly be running scanners and, cleaning garbage off. But that's partially user error. When you're downloading crap from the internet, you never know what you're going to get. And Windows for sure is a lot less secure than anything else that I've used. It's terrible. I use it still a little bit. I use it for games, right? And but Steam is getting better with the Linux games, so soon I won't have to do that. Peter says, I'm playing a game on Windows and watching Steven on a Mac. Well, there you go. That's the best of both worlds, right? I have a friend that uses a Mac as his main computer, but he has a Windows computer on the side and he shares his mouse and keyboard between them. So that might be a good way to do it. Yeah, I don't know. CalCorp says Apple's on its way to being the first and only $3 trillion company. After over 40 years, they still lead the industry. Says so much about their competition. Uh, I'm hoping to be their competition soon, Mr. Korf. So I won't comment on Apple, except to say that I don't find them to be a very ethical company. I don't care how successful they are. Um, I think it's entirely possible to make computers without employing slave laborers or child laborers. And so I have a big problem with that. And also the other ethical things that they have been caught in, like purposefully slowing people's phones down so they just buy new ones. That is terrible, CalCorp. So, I understand people are Eric Anderson says Mac OS locked down Linux. I run Ubuntu for most stuff. Yeah, I ran Ubuntu for a little while, and then I ran Linux Mint. But mostly I run my own version of Linux, which is based off of Puppy Linux, which runs entirely in RAM. It's super fast, even on this 10-year-old iMac. I got I think it's 10 years. I don't know how old this thing is. It's pretty old. But it's a 27-inch iMac, and it's ancient. And this thing runs super quick with my system on it. Oh, let me check in. Let me check in with something real fast, friends. No money, no honey. There we go. All right, friends. Well, I guess, CalCorp asks, less ethical than Microsoft or Google. No, I think they all have really big issues. And actually, I'll send it to you if I can. I got to dig it out, but I wrote a statement of ethics for my company, which you might find interesting. And my statement of ethics is very simple, is that no humans get hurt in the production of our products. And believe it or not, that's a hard thing to ensure, because what if I hire overseas manufacturers? I don't know that the workers on the line are going to be treated ethically, but I'm going to make it a point to make sure they are, or I won't employ that company to help make our products. And I get it. It's difficult. It's a complicated issue, Mr. Korf, the ethical production of products, because even when you get into parts, like if the computer uses lithium battery, was that lithium mined ethically, or were children used to mine that lithium in Africa? These are complicated issues, but I think if you're going to run a company that's making millions of products, it's really, you have a responsibility to make sure that people are not being mistreated to produce your products and create profit. I'm all for capitalism, but I think it's got to be done ethically, or you lose a lot of points with me. I don't really care if you're a billion-dollar company, if you became a billion-dollar company by exploiting children and slave labor. Various distros are like programming languages. Once you know your way around, you can pick and choose. Yeah, and a lot has to do with, when you get into Linux, Eric Anderson, a lot has to do with just things like your window manager. Like, I use XFCE, and I can use that on Linux Mint. I could use it on Arch Linux. And to me, like, once you learn your window manager really well, the distro doesn't matter so much. I mean, they have different package managers or ways of installing software, but other than that, and I like Debian based, so my Linux system is Debian based. You can always get a deb package for any piece of software. I can't tell you, Eric Anderson, I used to compile, right? You would get the source code and compile it right on your machine. I haven't had to do that in a few years. Well, no, that's not true. For Altos, I have custom compiled some things to get them to run better. Raycar, how do we get your version? You can go to the Altos Alpha 1 is out, but I really recommend that people wait, because the Altos Alpha 2 will be out next month. I know I've been saying that for a while, but it's really ready now. I have to fix a few last minute things and do a few new graphics, and then upload it. And that's going to be 100 gigabytes. So for those familiar with Linux, it usually comes on a DVD that's like 4 gigs. And then once it's installed, you just have a very basic system. And then you've got to install all your applications. Altos is different in that it's a maximal sort of distribution that comes with 100 gigabytes of software. There's tons of video editors, audio editors, software synthesizers, computer-aided design, graphics programs. Just, it's really, for creative people, I think it's a really powerful system. The Alpha 1 was 32 gigabytes. And also in the new Alpha, for Altos, which is Alpha 2, excuse me, I went out of my way to include all these different emulators. So essentially, Altos Alpha 2 will run almost any computer software, Commodore 64, Commodore Amiga, classic Mac OS, IBM OS 2 software, DOS software, Tandy Color computer, Atari ST. It'll run almost any computer software through the emulation. And also, it'll run almost any game through the console emulators that are included. Now, I don't include ROMs because I can't legally, but most people know where to find them. And if you get Altos up and running on a spare machine, you can run Sega Genesis, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64, Sega Dreamcast, PlayStation 1 and 2, Xbox and Xbox 360 games, Neo Geo, TurboGrafx 16. I've gone out of my way to make sure that I want it to run anything. If you've got an old game you used to play 20 years ago, it should run it. So I spent a lot of time doing that. I'm too wedded to Adobe products, need them as industry standard for the work I do. Yeah, I understand that, Daniel, but I think that they're really roping people into software slavery, because once you get used to using that audio editor, video editor, special effects designer, After Effects, whatever, you really can't, well, you could learn something else, but you won't, because you're just used to it and it works for you. I made it a point to never get involved with Adobe Cloud. I still use many Adobe products, but I use the versions that they made right before they went to the cloud model. I don't like paying by the month to use software. I like to buy it once, and I should be able to use it for the rest of my life. That's my own personal philosophy, and also free and open source software. There's always an alternative. The problem is that, yeah, of course, like a commercial video editor like Adobe and Final Cut and all that, they're going to be better than a free open source video editor. But with a few workarounds, you'd be surprised. You'd be able to do everything you do right now on the Creative Cloud. You'd be able to do on a good Linux system if you knew somebody like me that could set it up for you. Out of the box, not knowing much about Linux, you're going to have a hard time coming up with all those alternatives, but it is what it is. I put the time in. I'm going to try 10 Linux video editors until I get one that I can work, sufficiently. Killed my power switch light. That's not good. Yeah, I agree, but can't change. Need to be cross-compatible with colleagues. Yeah, I don't know. Do you do a lot of projects where you're editing a video with 10 other people? I don't, so I don't have to worry about that. Industry standard means have to use it. Only if you choose to, I think, though, Daniel. I don't think you have to. I think it just makes your life more convenient. Yeah, Eric Anderson, Blender, GIMP, FreeCAD, etc. Yeah, all those are included in Altos too, by the way. But I don't know how we got onto software and operating systems. I thought we would finish up talking about Roswell, but I see that the hour is getting late, so we're probably going to wrap things up here for the night. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. I always say this, friends, it's always good when there's an audience. I'm always happy when there's an audience, and I'm happy that you could be a part of mine. Until next time, friends, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all of you.